Chapter 1178. The iceberg where the ice palace was located melted instantly, not into water, but into steam. Wherever the true samadhi fire reached, and even further away, was filled with smoke and mist. The blue-armored celestial soldier who had just fled immediately noticed Bai Qi's terrible condition. He cried out in grief, "Emperor of Netherworld!" He turned around and shot the soul-slaying arrow at Hong Tailong, who was beating Bai Qi. Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be seen amidst the rapidly dispersing mist and the colorful flame. But suddenly, Yu Qianqiu's furious roar rang out. "Kill!" Tens of thousands of golden specks of light shot out from the blazing flames, blotting out the sky and covering the earth. In order to save the Emperor of the Underworld, the blue-armored celestial soldiers who had drawn their bows and shot arrows furiously didn't care about their own lives. Instead of dodging the rain-like attacks of the divine swords, they braced themselves and turned around to shoot the arrow at Hong Tailong. As soon as the arrow was shot out, a dozen indestructible golden light specks pierced through his body, almost turning him into a sieve. The soul-slaying bow in his hand was cut into a few pieces by the rapidly piercing divine swords, making a buzzing noise as the bowstring was broken. Tens of blood spurted out from the blue-armored celestial soldier's body. Although he tried to choke back something with a reluctant expression, he still choked out a mouthful of blood. His head tilted to one side, and he fell straight down to the snowland below. Silver-armored celestial soldier and his two companions, who had hastily dodged the divine swords, turned around and saw this scene. Immediately, they let out a deafening howl. "Celestial army!" At this moment, Hong Tailong dashed out from the deep crater with a bloody man in his hand. The soul-slaying arrow brushed past his shoulder. Boom! The ground shook, and the snowland cracked. The colorful flame covering 1,000 meters on the snowland shrank rapidly, and a man made of fire dashed out. Behind him, tens of thousands of golden light specks circled like a shoal of fish in the ocean. Hong Tailong carried Bai Qi, who was already on the verge of death. His white clothes dyed in blood, and was still tightly bound by the dragon-binding rope. He flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side, handed him over and said, "Take him, I've already sealed his cultivation." Then he turned to look at the three dumbfounded people in the distance and sneered, "Leave those three fellows who helped the evildoer to me." Yu Qianqiu retracted his true samadhi fire, and reached out to grab the dragon-binding rope. He looked coldly at Bai Qi, who was beaten up beyond recognition, and casually lifted him up. He wouldn't have the slightest bit of sympathy for him. This was a life-and-death battle. If he lost today, his ending wouldn't be any better. Other than death, they might even hand him over to Yan Juexing. That was why it was said that showing mercy to the enemy was equivalent to committing suicide. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu called out to Hong Tailong. His eyes narrowed as he swept a glance at the three people in the distance. He felt a little strange in his heart. If the three of them had split up and fled, Hong Tailong might not have been able to capture all of them. It would already be good if he could capture two of them. However, the three of them did not flee. Instead, they were looking at him with grief and indignation. Hong Tailong looked at him in confusion and asked, "Are we going to let them go?" Yu Qianqiu didn't reply to him. He stretched out his other hand, and a divine sword flashed into his hand. He placed the sword on Bai Qi's neck expressionlessly and shouted at the three people, "If anyone dares to flee, I will immediately cut off his head. If you don't want him to die, then obediently surrender. I can consider letting you guys live." "No," Hong Tailong roared angrily. "I can let them go, but he must die." He pointed his finger at Bai Qi. From the looks of it, he still held a grudge against Yi Tiankong. "Why don't I hand him over to you? And you can do whatever you want to do. After you're done, you can go back to your hometown, and I'll go do my own thing. From now on, we won't have anything to do with each other?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him and sneered. Hong Tailong clenched his fists tightly and angrily turned his head away. "Yu Qianqiu, you have to keep your word." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers' sorrowful voice came from afar. "I, Yu Qianqiu, am famous for being a man of my word. What I say is already set in stone. Have you ever heard of me, Yu Qianqiu, going back on my word?" Yu Qianqiu grabbed Bai Qi and placed the sword on his neck. He shouted back, "As long as you guys answer my questions honestly and promise to serve me from now on, I can let you guys go." The silver-armored army of 1,000 soldiers and the other two looked at each other with a bitter smile, then nodded in unison and slowly flew over. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head and said, "Hong Tailong, go seal their cultivation bases." Seeing the three flying over, Bai Qi's eyes, which had already lost focus, once again lit up. His chest, which had almost been smashed, suddenly heaved up and down, and a large mouthful of blocked blood spurted out of his mouth. Staring at the three flying over with bloodshot eyes, he desperately roared in pain, "Run! Run! Don't worry about me. Don't believe his nonsense. Hurry up and go. I beg you guys." Yu Qianqiu didn't stop Bai Qi from shouting. He pretended to be merciful to the three people. The three people looked at Bai Qi's pitiful appearance. Who could have imagined that the emperor of the underworld, who was so graceful in the underworld royal palace, would end up like this? The three men, who were made of iron, instantly burst into tears. They stubbornly shook their heads and refused. It was the first time in their lives that they refused the emperor of the underworld's command. They didn't expect it to be under such circumstances. The three people didn't leave. Instead, they sped up and flew over. Bai Qi's face instantly swelled, and tears of blood came out of his eyes. He screamed in pain, "Don't come over. Run." His voice was so miserable that it was like a ghost being thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Originally, Hong Tailong hated Bai Qi to the bone. However, when he saw that Bai Qi was willing to give up his only hope of survival for the sake of his subordinates, he could not help but be moved. He cast a deep look at Bai Qi, who was crying tears of blood, and teleported to the front of Silver Armor Army and the other two without any hesitation. With a lightning-fast move, he quickly sealed their cultivations and brought them over. Seeing that the situation was under control, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and put away the 10,000 swords as one. He carried Bai Qi, who was badly mutilated, and landed on the ice field and threw him to the ground. Hong Tailong also threw the three people to the ground. The three people climbed up and wanted to help Bai Qi, who was still being helped. However, their cultivation was sealed, and they couldn't help Bai Qi, who was weighed down by the dragon-binding rope. They fell down one by one, climbed up one by one, and fell down one by one. At this moment, the ice mountain that the ice palace was built on had melted. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress, who had hidden far away, also came back. The Snow Empress was still carrying her unconscious daughter. The two of them were also frightened by the fierce battle, but Yu Qianqiu's true samadhi fire attracted them. Once the battle ended, they immediately rushed back. They saw hope to save their daughter, because Yu Qianqiu had promised them. "Let him go. We have already stretched out our necks to be killed. You have already sealed his cultivation. Why don't you let him go?" The Silver Armor Army roared at Hong Tailong. "Even if you want to kill him, there is no need to treat him like this. He was once the supreme emperor of the Netherworld, and he has his own dignity. At least when the Myriad Swords Demon Lord died, no one humiliated him." The three people were really powerless to help Bai Qi up. Without their cultivation, the ice under their feet was slippery. There was no expression on Hong Tailong's face. For some unknown reason, he actually opened his mouth and swallowed the dragon-binding rope that was binding Bai Qi back into his stomach. Without the weight of the dragon-binding rope, Bai Qi choked out another mouthful of blood when the three people helped him up. He looked at the three people and shook his head with boundless grief and indignation. "Why are you all so stupid? We have no value to him now. Do you all really think that he will let us go? We know that there is no way out." The Purple Armor Army suddenly laughed bitterly and said, "But we are already used to going through life and death with you. We have been like this for so many years. Moreover, all of our lives were saved by you. You have never let us down, and you have always treated us well. How can we bear to leave you behind?" Bai Qi closed his eyes, and tears of blood flowed out from his eyes. Suddenly, he opened his eyes angrily and tilted his head to look at Yu Qianqiu. He gritted his teeth and said, "Yu Qianqiu, what will make you let them go?" Yu Qianqiu looked at him coldly and didn't answer his question. Instead, he said indifferently, "Actually, before you attacked me that time, I didn't have any ill will towards you. I just don't understand. Could it be that just because Mu Yuanzi injured you, you're going to open the demon world and let all the beings of the three realms die with you?" Bai Qi's struggling body softened, and he lay in the arms of the silver armor army of 1,000 soldiers. He laughed wildly and said, "Why? I also want to know why. I once led my subordinates to risk their lives for the sake of all living beings in the 3 realms. I risked my life to seal the demon realm with King Jintai. For the sake of all living beings in the 3 realms, I've always suppressed Kim Tae and prevented him from acting recklessly. For so many years, I've always warned Kim Tae that if he dared to disturb the balance of the 3 realms, I would lead the heroes of the netherworld to beat him up. Otherwise, do you think that inhumane fellow would really treat everyone in the world as humans? Let me ask you, who has ever heard of the 3 realms not being in chaos for 100,000 years? But why? Bai Qi retorted angrily. Why do I have to bear the retribution for Master Jin's evil deed of killing the entire Wu family? Why did Mu Yuanzi injure me instead of dealing with the main culprit? Why do all the beings in the 3 realms turn against me when I'm working for the welfare of the 3 realms? Not a single person, not even a single person stood out to speak for me. Since the entire world is filled with heartless people, if I don't see rivers of heartless people's blood flow, why should I live in sorrow? Why should I die in sorrow? Then let me tell you why. Because there is no why. No matter how good you think you are, it's all because you think you are. Everything is retribution. If you can't figure it out, you can slowly think about it in your next life. Yu Qianqiu said as he took out a divine sword. Hong Tailong was slightly startled. Didn't you want to let him go? Why does it look like you want to kill me? Little did he know that Yu Qianqiu and the silver armor army of 1,000 soldiers were negotiating terms, because he didn't want to leave behind any future troubles that might suddenly pop up one day to take revenge. Thus, he purposely led the 3 of them to surrender, so that they wouldn't slip through the net. To him, if he didn't kill a single one and let them all go, then he would be a good person. Since he was going to kill them, he would have to eliminate them completely. Moreover, Bai Qi was already a member of the Devil Dao. He had once sworn to the heavens at the 1,000-mile lake that he would exterminate the Devil Dao and sacrifice all living beings in the demon domain. Chapter 1179. Right at this moment, the Snow Empress suddenly flashed over. She braced herself and cupped her hands with a bitter smile. I know you want the Xianming soul refining technique. If you let go of the Emperor of the Underworld, I am willing to give it to you. The Snow Empress, who was carrying Xue Linglong, looked at them worriedly. She was afraid that her husband had angered Yu Qianqiu. After all, Hong Tailong and Yu Qianqiu were very powerful. Especially Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi True Fire, which was the nemesis of the couple's cultivation method. More importantly, she was afraid that angering Yu Qianqiu would mean giving up the chance to cure her daughter. However, they were indebted to Bai Qi. Although she felt uncomfortable holding back some words, she couldn't say them out loud. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the couple, then slowly raised the divine sword in his hand and gently caressed the glowing edge of the sword. Snow Emperor, we had an agreement. I saved your daughter's life, and you gave me the Xianming soul refining technique in exchange. Now, you want to use it to exchange for Bai Qi's life. You better think carefully. The Xianming soul refining technique can only exchange for one person's life. Whether it is Bai Qi or your daughter, it's up to you. The Snow Emperor lowered his head solemnly. The Snow Empress looked at her daughter in her arms, then at her husband, her face full of anxiety. Bai Qi struggled for a while, and the 3 understood and helped him up. Facing the Snow Emperor, Bai Qi was very gratified and nodded. I appreciate Brother Snow's righteousness. With Brother Snow's words, I can die without regrets. My friendship with Brother Snow was not in vain. However, the 4 of us are destined to live and die together today. I will not live alone, or it will be worse than death. So please don't interfere in this matter. This has nothing to do with you and your wife. Emperor of the Underworld. The Snow Emperor wanted to say something, but Bai Qi had already turned to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was ignoring him, and sighed. I didn't expect this. Yu Qianqiu, who didn't even dare to speak loudly in front of me, was now in control of my life and death. It seems that the Saintess is indeed a prophet. I had already vaguely figured out some of it, but in the end, I still made a mistake. I can't blame others for my fate. You're right, everything is retribution. Netherworld Saintess? Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and lowered the sword in his hand. He tilted his head and asked, "She told you about me?" A bitter smile appeared on Bai Qi's bloody face, and his eyes became blurry. He recalled the conversation he had with the underworld saintess in the small courtyard of the dark royal palace. He closed his eyes slightly and said, "Yu Qianqiu, back then, I wanted to kill you first. Killing me today is my retribution. However, I treated you well back then. Promise me one thing." Yu Qianqiu frowned and said faintly, "Let's hear it first." Now that things had come to this, he wouldn't give in so easily. A warm expression appeared on Bai Qi's face as he said, "Don't let the news of my death spread. That's all I want." Yu Qianqiu was startled. He asked with some surprise, "You're already dead, yet you still care about the waves behind you. I want to know why. Is it worth it for me to promise you?" Wan Ling's figure appeared in Bai Qi's mind. He had protected the entire 10,000 Holy Palace from the Demon King 3 nights. After rescuing Wan Ling, he and Wan Ling had an intimate time together. When they parted, he had said that he would come back to pick her up after finishing his business. Who would have thought that it would be an eternal farewell? He let out a soft sigh and closed his eyes as he replied, "If she doesn't know that I'm dead, she will naturally live on. I have nothing left for her. The only thing I can give her now is to give her the hope to live on." Everyone else was confused, but Yu Qianqiu seemed to be deep in thought. He had already linked it to Wan Ling. He paused and said, "I can promise you this. I originally wanted to use the Xianming soul refining technique to refine you all into profound weapons. As you said, on account of the kindness you have shown me, I will give the 4 of you a quick death. From now on, the grudges between us will be resolved, and we will not owe each other anything." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden light flashed in his hand. With 4 pu sounds, 4 heads bounced up and fell to the ground. Warm blood spurted out from their mouths. The 4 corpses fell to the ground and twitched for a while before they stopped moving. The blood that flowed out from the severed heads quickly solidified on the icy ground. Hong Tai Long looked at Yu Qianqiu as he silently put away the divine sword in his hand. Previously, he had thought that he would let them go. He didn't expect that he would not leave a single one alive. Hong Tai Long wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. The Snow Empress and her husband looked at Bai Qi's corpse dumbfoundedly. Suddenly, a ball of 7-colored flame swept across, and there was nothing left on the ground. Even the blood had turned into ashes. Yu Qianqiu turned around and walked towards the husband and wife. He stopped in front of the Snow Empress who was carrying Xue Linglong, and said indifferently, "Snow Empress, I have always remembered the promise I made in the past. Today, I have come to fulfill it." He stretched out his 5 claws and grabbed toward Xue Linglong. Not long after, a strand of 7-colored flame that was not much thicker than a strand of hair emerged from Xue Linglong's body. It was this little fellow that caused the Snow Empress and her husband to be helpless even with all their efforts. That strand of flame drilled into Yu Qianqiu's palm. Xue Linglong, who was still unconscious, let out a soft moan. Her body that was being carried moved slightly, and the sickly redness on her cheeks gradually disappeared. The husband and wife looked at their daughter who was recovering quickly, but they didn't feel the slightest bit happy. The Snow Empress raised her head, and saw that Yu Qianqiu was staring at her with a burning gaze. She couldn't help but smile bitterly and shake her head. She took out a jade archive and quickly inserted something into it, then flicked it out. Yu Qianqiu casually caught the jade archive and examined it. After thinking for a long time, he nodded slightly and said, "So that's how it is. I understand now." The jade archive was immediately crushed into pieces. In fact, the Xianming soul refining technique wasn't a technique that required a large amount of time to practice. It was a technique that condensed all of the opponent's cultivation into the essence of the technique and used it. It required a spiritual object that was connected to the user, so that the user could control it. No matter what type of spiritual object was used, the user would need the same type as the medium to unleash its power. This was the reason why the Snow Empress said that Yu Qianqiu couldn't practice without absorbing the fire spirit. After understanding the secret of the Xianming soul refining technique, Yu Qianqiu was confident that he could use it on the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood and earth. Of course, the prerequisite was that he had to swallow all 5 spirits of heaven and earth. The Snow Empress would never have imagined that Yu Qianqiu had mastered all 5 elements of the technique. This was also the reason why Yu Qianqiu was so interested in the Xianming soul refining technique. As long as he mastered it, he would be able to summon an almost unkillable dark soldier in any terrain in the future. The Snow Empress and her husband didn't have anything to be happy about when their daughter's worries were resolved. They held their daughter and left with flagging interest. Now that the ice palace was destroyed, they suffered a great loss. The ice soul mysterious ice, which was refined by many experts, was destroyed by Yu Qianqiu's Samadhi true fire. But they didn't say anything and left. They wanted to find a suitable place to rebuild the ice palace in the snowy mountain. After today's scene, they saw Yu Qianqiu's ruthlessness. It was hard for them, who had always been aloof from worldly affairs, to accept it. They probably didn't want to have anything to do with Yu Qianqiu anymore. At least in their opinion. Bai Qi was much more affectionate and righteous. Yu Qianqiu stood silently on the ice field and watched the couple leave. He stood for a long time in the howling cold wind. After a long time, he looked up at the dark night sky and sighed. I thought I would become friends with them, but I knew it was impossible when I decided to kill Bai Qi. All these years, in order to do some things, I gained a lot, but I also lost too many precious things. What is the most precious? The human heart is the most precious. The people I was familiar with left me one by one. Some died, some left, and there's no turning back. Maybe when I gain more, I will also lose more. Hong Tailong also couldn't accept the fact that he killed Bai Qi and the other 3 people. Although he was the one who shouted the loudest to kill Bai Qi, after hearing Yu Qianqiu's sigh, he seemed to understand his helplessness. After all, which person didn't have a story behind them? Everyone had been honest before, and maybe everyone had a touching story. But this was a life and death cultivation. There was more than one person like Bai Qi in the world, who could carry so many burdens on their shoulders. If they didn't get rid of them quickly, there would only be more and more burdens, and nothing could be done. Just as Hong Tailong was about to say a few words of consolation, he discovered that Yu Qianqiu took a deep breath and became spirited again. He immediately came back to life from his loneliness and disappeared in a flash. His recovery speed was too fast. It was as if he was a completely different person, as if nothing had happened earlier. After Yu Qianqiu searched around the icy plains, he found Bai Qi's treasure, the obsidian underworld light mirror. He tried to control it, but discovered that it was impervious to fire and water. Even his divine sense couldn't penetrate it. It seemed like there was no possibility for him to control it. Hong Tailong flashed to his side and sneered. Don't try anymore. The obsidian underworld light mirror is the symbol of the netherworld's supreme ruler. Other than meditation cultivators, no one from the outside world is able to control it. There's such a strange thing? Yu Qianqiu flipped it around and looked at it. Then he put it away with some regret. This thing could communicate with each other through a video call. It was a pity that he couldn't use such a high-grade treasure. Where should we go now? To sweep across the demonic path's army in the netherworld, or to slaughter in the immortal realm? Hong Tailong rubbed his palms together. He couldn't wait to prove to the 3 realms that he, Hong Tailong, had returned. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and calculated for a while. He muttered to himself, looking at the time, it's about time. I wonder if that fellow, Xinyu, will keep his promise. Then he suddenly raised his head and said, my master doesn't know about the human realm being sealed. I want to report to him first. Your master? Where? Hong Tailong was stunned. Yu Qianqiu had already waved his hand, and the 2 of them disappeared from where they stood. By the netherworld river beside the myriad heavens boundary barrier, the 2 of them appeared. Hong Tailong quickly looked around and asked hesitantly, this is? You're finally here? A woman's clear voice rang out. The 2 of them looked at the other side of the river. The netherworld saintess slowly walked out from the ground. It seemed like she had opened up an underground space for herself. Hong Tailong was a little surprised and wanted to ask, is this your master? Yu Qianqiu was also a little surprised as he asked, why are you here? Chapter 1180. However, What surprised him even more was that Xinyu also walked out of the cave, smiled awkwardly at him, and curiously looked at Hong Tailong. Then he flew over with the underworld saintess. Seeing that Xinyu kept his promise, Yu Qianqiu was relieved, but he was a little puzzled as to why the two of them were together. He couldn't help but ask, "Why are you two together?" Xinyu said embarrassedly, "I came here a few days in advance to wait for you. Who knew that I would also meet Miss Xian here, so we waited for you here together. Taishu Xian is also waiting for me. Could it be that her ability to predict the future had reached such a level? Or is it a coincidence?" Just as Yu Qianqiu showed some doubts on his face, Taishu Xian, whose face was covered with a black veil, suddenly sighed faintly and asked, "You really came here? In that case, Bai Qi didn't escape the calamity after all." Hong Tailong, who was already confused, was even more puzzled. The two of them came here in the blink of an eye. How did she know that Bai Qi had encountered a calamity? Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to underestimate her. He had a deeper understanding of this woman's divine foresight. However, because he had promised Bai Qi not to leak the news that he was dead, a confused look appeared on his face as he asked, "What do you mean Bai Qi didn't escape the calamity? What happened to Bai Qi?" Hong Tailong immediately turned his head and rolled his eyes. Taishu Xian looked deeply at Yu Qianqiu and shook his head slightly. "Bai Qi and I were friends, and I couldn't bear to see him suffer a tragedy. I originally wanted him to use you to defy the heavens and change his fate. I also thought that he understood. Now it seems that the two of you didn't get along after all. It's really hard to defy the heavens' will." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered. He wanted to say something but hesitated for a while. In the end he still said with a blank look, "What do you mean? Why don't I understand?" Taishu Xian saw that he was deliberately acting dumb, so he didn't linger on this topic. He quietly turned around and said, "I have been waiting for you here for a long time. Since you want to go inside the celestial boundary, why don't we go together?" "What? The celestial barrier of the mausoleum of the gods?" Hong Tailong looked around in shock, while Yu Qianqiu glanced at Xinyu meaningfully, as if he was asking, "Did you say that?" Feeling guilty, Jiuyu turned around and flashed into the river. He transformed into a giant clam and opened his shell to wait for the three of them to come in. Taishu Xian was the first to enter in a flash, followed by Yu Qianqiu. Hong Tailong still had a shocked expression on his face as he glanced left and right before following behind them. The huge clamshell closed up, and it quickly swam upstream in the Netherworld River. When the few of them came out of the clamshell again, they had already arrived at the cliff within the boundary of all heavens. Hong Tailong stared at the huge moon with his mouth agape. Taishu Xian seemed a little excited to return to this place. He didn't greet the crowd and immediately flew in the direction of his home. Yu Qianqiu took out a flying shuttle and let Hong Tailong drive it. He brought along Jiuyu and caught up with Taishu Xian in the blink of an eye. They carried her and quickly disappeared into the distance. When they arrived at the small courtyard on the monster-like mountain, Taishu Xian couldn't wait any longer and flashed down. White-haired Grandma Yin walked out of the house and saw her. She immediately called out with a trembling voice, "Little Xian." Taishu Xian quickly walked over and knelt down on the spot. She hugged Grandma Yan's leg and cried, "Grandma, Xianer is back." After Grandma Yan helped her up and checked on her, the two of them hugged each other and cried. As they cried, they asked each other something and completely ignored the three people who walked in after them. After a long while, the two women who looked like a grandparent and granddaughter finally stopped crying. When Grandma Yin saw Yu Qianqiu, she wiped her tears and let go of Taishu Xian. She walked to him and bowed. "Yu Qianqiu, this old woman thanks you." She was thanking him for bringing back Taishu Xian, who had disappeared for so many years. "You can't do that." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly held her. Grandma Yin didn't stand on ceremony. She pulled his hand and led him into the house. She then waved at the other two people and said, "Come in, come in, come in, everyone come in." "Grandma Yin, you don't have to be so polite." Yu Qianqiu persuaded her and said seriously, "I still have something to do, so I won't disturb you this time. I'll visit Grandma next time." He suddenly thought of something and asked respectfully, "By the way, Grandma, have you heard any news about my master recently?" Hong Tailong's ears pricked up. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a stunned expression, and pondered in his heart. Could this guy's master be in the mausoleum of the god of sin? Your master? Grandma Yin was also stunned. Then she came to a sudden realization and said, You're asking about that green-robed madman, right? Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. The so-called green-robed madman shouldn't be anyone else. He then coughed dryly and said, From what Grandma said, you seem to have news about my master? Grandma Yin also felt that her choice of words was a little inappropriate, but she still frowned and nodded with a solemn expression. She said, I do know, but you must not let the others here know that he is your master. Otherwise, I'm afraid it will bring you trouble. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched again. He guessed that the old man had done something that angered the heavens and the people again. So he asked weakly, Grandma, can you explain it clearly? What exactly happened? Sigh. Grandma Yin sighed and shook her head. She said, Your master killed old man Meng. That's not all. He provoked the other tomb guards one after another. As a result, many of them were angered by him. So more than 100 of them joined forces and finally beat him up until he was seriously injured. Who knew that after he escaped into the boundary of heavens to recuperate, he would not stop. After he came out, he killed 60 to 70 minor god-level cultivators in a row. Dozens of them were seriously injured and luckily escaped with their lives. In the end, a tomb guard with the cultivation of an early-stage great god was alarmed. He and your master fought fiercely for a day and a night. In the end, the two of them were evenly matched. Both of them were seriously injured and had to retreat. Your master has not come out to cause trouble for a long time. He has been recuperating in the boundary of heavens. Although everyone can see him, they can't break into the boundary of heavens. So they can't do anything to him. Yu Qianqiu was speechless for a while. He realized that the old man was getting more and more reckless. He dared to challenge a group of god-level experts alone. Was it fun to be seriously injured for no reason? It was simply unreasonable. The others were also speechless. After the shock, Taishu Xian's eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Xingyu seemed to have heard of this before. He was speechless. Hong Tailong looked at Yu Qianqiu as if he was looking at a monster. Never in his dreams would he have thought that Yu Qianqiu had such an awesome master. Grandma Yin paused for a while and smiled bitterly. Now the people in the cemetery of the God of Tombs are in a state of panic because of your master. No one knows when he will come out to cause trouble again. Everyone is spreading the news, hoping to unite to deal with your master. Sigh. Back then, if it wasn't for last Xian who divined for me and told me not to get involved in the matters outside, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to escape from your master's hands. I just don't understand. What is your master trying to do? Everyone here is a group of people who stand aloof from worldly affairs. Why would he want to disturb the peace here? No one is provoking him. That he. Yu Qianqiu blushed with shame. Finally, he gritted his teeth and said, There's something wrong with the old man's head. Don't lower yourself to his level. Grandma Yin immediately said angrily, Who wants to lower themselves to his level? We really don't want to lower ourselves to his level. And we can't wait to stay away from him. But he insisted on coming to our door, and we can't leave the cemetery of the God of Tombs. What do you want us to do? Yu Qianqiu also smiled bitterly. The old man was still resolutely striving for a higher and stronger goal. It seemed that he had never wavered in that thought. Yu Qianqiu didn't know what to say. Seeing that the atmosphere was a little awkward, Taishu Xian immediately came forward to resolve it. Grandma, I want to pay my respects to Father and Grandfather Moon God. Grandma Yin glanced at her and understood what she was thinking. She didn't linger on this topic anymore. She shook her head and walked out with the help of Taishu Xian. Ahem. Since they are elders, I should pay my respects. Yu Qianqiu followed out with some guilt. Then he cursed in his heart. Damn it. I didn't do the wicked things that the old man did. Why should I feel guilty? Hong Tailong and Xingyu looked at each other and followed out. In front of the tombs of Taishu Zheng and the moon god, Taishu Xian knelt down and kowtowed sincerely. He was even muttering something. Yu Qianqiu bowed repeatedly to the tombstones. Xingyu followed suit. Hong Tailong crossed his arms and followed suit. Taishu Zheng didn't know who it was. When he saw the tomb of the moon god, he muttered, "So the moon god is buried here too." Grandma Yin saw that he was being disrespectful and naturally couldn't stand it. But when she realized that she couldn't see through his cultivation, she couldn't help but mock. "Do you know my husband?" Huh. Hong Tailong turned around and was stunned. After he reacted, he said disapprovingly, "The moon god. I heard of him when I was in the divine realm." "You are?" Huh. Grandma Yin was stunned. She glanced at them and asked in confusion, "You are also from the divine realm? Why haven't I seen you before? May I know your name?" She mistakenly thought that Hong Tailong was a tomb guard in the Divine Tomb Cemetery. "It's not strange that you haven't seen me before." Hong Tailong revealed a normal expression and said, "I, Hong Tailong, am a nobody in the Dragon Clan. I have never made a name for myself in the Divine Realm. It's normal that we haven't seen each other." You are from the Dragon Clan?" Grandma Yin looked at him in surprise, as if she couldn't believe it. Just as she was about to ask again, she saw Hong Tailong casually walking to the front of the huge grave mound. He caressed the dark red crystals that formed the grave mound and said, "It is said that as long as the corpse of the person buried in the blood jade red crystals is intact, his cultivation and corpse can be maintained. At the same time, the blood jade red crystals can absorb the essence of the moon and condense the dead soul. When the time is right, the dead can be resurrected. This is also the reason why people in the divine realm fight to be buried in the divine tomb cemetery. I wonder if it's true?" Grandma Yin was already annoyed by his rude behavior. Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and quickly pulled Hong Tailong away to stop him from carelessly touching the grave mound. Then he pulled Xinyu along and the three of them bid farewell to Grandma Yin. Grandma Yin nodded unhappily. She didn't say any polite words and let the three of them leave. Chapter 1181. Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Hong Tailong, who was on the rapidly flying shuttle, was also somewhat unhappy. He could also tell that Grandma Yin wasn't very fond of him. He coldly snorted at Yu Qianqiu. "Why are you afraid of her? She's no match for me with her cultivation." "You think you're right." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. "Respect the dead. If you don't put her in your eyes, she didn't offend you. Why did you have to touch her grave? No one would be happy. Do I, a dragon, have to kneel and kowtow to her family's dead?" Hong Tailong waved his hand disdainfully and continued to steer his flying shuttle. Suddenly he turned around and sneered. "I understand. You're afraid that you'll be implicated by your master's troubles. You're afraid that she'll be unhappy and expose your identity, right? Don't talk about useless things." Yu Qianqiu snorted. He crossed his arms and rubbed his chin, thinking about something. The expression on his face was somewhat strange. Suddenly, he looked at Hong Tailong with a strange gaze and said, "Let me ask you, you said that as long as the corpses of the dead are intact, they can maintain their cultivation. Is that true?" "I don't know if it's true, but that's what I've heard in the divine realm. However, I've never heard of anyone being resurrected, so I'm not sure. Why are you interested in this? Do you also want to be buried in?" Hong Tailong's voice paused, and his body suddenly trembled. He turned around and exclaimed in shock, "Could it be that you want to use the Xianming soul refining technique too?" He glanced at Xinyu and swallowed his words. He still didn't know how close this Xinyu fellow was to Yu Qianqiu, and there were some things that he couldn't let him know. However, Yu Qianqiu nodded thoughtfully and said, "If his cultivation really hasn't dissipated, I wonder if it's been too long since he died. Is there any use in using the Xianming soul refining technique?" Hong Tailong's eyes flickered as he swept his gaze across his surroundings. He was a little excited as he chuckled. "Do you want to give it a try?" He seemed to be searching for a target. Xinyu looked at the two of them in confusion. He didn't know what they were talking about, but his instincts told him that they were up to no good. At that moment, the flying shuttle arrived above the tomb that Old Man Meng had been guarding. The ground was full of potholes, as if an interstellar war had taken place. However, the dark red crystal tomb was still there. Hong Tailong winked at Yu Qianqiu and gestured at the grave below. Yu Qianqiu immediately had a look of disdain on his face. Looking at this old fellow's character, he must have done a lot of good things with Yi Tiankong back then. "I'm not in the mood for this right now. Let's go to the edge of the all-celestial boundary and see how my master is doing, said Yu Qianqiu as he pointed forward. All right. We'll talk about it when we get back. Hong Tailong chuckled as if he was very interested in being a thief. He forgot about the dignity of the dragon race and flew away on the flying shuttle. The flying shuttle soon arrived at the edge of the all-celestial boundary. Who knew that just as it approached someone would shout, "Who is it?" Suddenly, 3 people descended from the sky, forming a triangle around the flying shuttle. Hong Tailong's gaze swept over the 3 people, and his pupils shrank slightly. He discovered that he could not see through the cultivation of these 3 people. They were clearly higher than him. Yu Qianqiu knew that they had encountered an expert when he saw Hong Tailong's expression. He quickly cupped his fists at the 3 and said with a smile, "We heard that someone is doing evil here, so we came here to see which madman has the guts to do so." The 3 of them turned a deaf ear to his words. Their gazes were fixed on Hong Tailong as they looked at each other in disbelief. After a long while, one of them asked in bewilderment, "You're from the dragon race?" The 3 of them had a higher cultivation than Hong Tailong, so they could see through Hong Tailong's true form. "Can't I?" Hong Tailong shouted with an imposing manner. "I heard that someone is doing evil here. I came here to investigate. Could it be that you are trying to stop me?" "So it's the dragon race's emissary." The 3 of them mistook Hong Tailong as an emissary sent by the dragon race. They bowed and greeted him. The person who answered earlier even explained to Hong Tailong respectfully, "There is indeed a madman doing evil here. He is inside the all-celestial boundary ahead. Emissary, please report back to Great Coiling Dragon God as soon as possible and eliminate this person." "Let me there." Hong Tailong pointed at Hong Tailong and put on airs. The 3 of them immediately led the way. Yu Qianqiu looked at Hong Tailong with a disgusted expression. He was even more certain that this old fellow must have done many bad things in the past. After arriving at their destination, the group stood at the edge of the transverse cliff. The person who answered earlier waved his hand and pointed into the darkness ahead. "Emissary, please look. That person is right there." Yu Qianqiu and the others looked in the direction he pointed. In the void not too far away, Bai Changchun was quietly floating there in his green robe. His eyes were closed and his brows were drooping. He was motionless like a statue. Golden arcs of light constantly flickered around his body. They either flew out of his body in complicated trajectories, or entered his body in an ethereal manner. The golden arcs of light were constantly moving in and out of his body. No one knew what they were doing. Hong Tailong glanced at Yu Qianqiu. From his expression, he confirmed that it was his master. He suddenly shouted, "Hey! Who is doing evil here? Quickly report your name." "It's useless." The person who guided them shook his head and explained, "The all-celestial boundary isolates everything. He can't hear our voices at all. We also don't know when he will wake up, and we can't go over either. Say, this person is very strange. I don't know what method he used to hide in the all-celestial boundary. I'm afraid Emissary Dragon will have to report back to Great Coiling Dragon God before he can make a decision. We can't contact your master. What should we do?" Hong Tailong secretly transmitted his voice. Yu Qianqiu was also helpless. He said in the dark, "Forget it. Let's focus on our own matters first." Hong Tailong then said to the other 3 with a stern expression, "I know what to do. I will go back and report back now." The 3 quickly offered to send him off, but Hong Tailong rejected them. He drove the flying shuttle again, and left with Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu. After watching them leave, one of them expressed doubt. "Why do I feel that this emissary dragon is a little strange? He actually brought 2 people with such shallow cultivation with him, and he even drove the flying shuttle himself. Do you think he might be an imposter?" Another person shook his head and said, "Why do you care so much? There's no doubt that he's a dragon. It's even more impossible for him to be an imposter. If he wasn't here on imperial orders, he wouldn't have been able to break through the all-celestial boundary. Besides, have you ever heard of a dragon daring to impersonate Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy?" As they were discussing, Hong Tailong, who had flown far away, suddenly turned around on the flying shuttle. He put his hands on Yu Qianqiu's shoulders and said with a trembling voice, If the matter of me impersonating Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy gets out, you have to help me explain to Great Coiling Dragon God. I'm only impersonating him so that you can meet your master. All right. I know. Yu Qianqiu pushed his hands away and said nonchalantly, "What's there to be afraid of? You didn't lie. You're Great Coiling Dragon God's envoy. Don't think too much. Stop there, and we'll do our own things." Xin Yu had been listening to the conversation between the two in bewilderment. Why did it involve Great Coiling Dragon God again? He felt that things were getting out of hand. He didn't know if following these two fellows was a blessing or a curse. Hong Tailong sighed and turned around. He thought to himself, "I'm afraid my time as an envoy has long expired." Not long after, the three of them returned to the sky above the lonely tomb. Hong Tailong looked around and made sure that there was no one around. He quickly put away the flying shuttle, and the three of them landed in front of the tombstone. There were words on the tombstone. Honghua Star Monarch. I've heard of this person. He's a member of the Light Ancient God clan. I think he's a late-stage great god. However, he fell when the demon god wreaked havoc in the divine realm. I didn't expect him to be buried here. Hong Tailong nodded as he looked at the tombstone. Haha. His surname is Hong, just like yours. Yu Qianqiu teased. Hong Tailong was about to retort when he saw Yu Qianqiu lightly stomp his feet. The three of them immediately sank into the ground. Then, the ground above them closed up again, blocking the bright moonlight. Hong Tailong couldn't help but shake his head. This guy really knew the earth elemental art. Meanwhile, Yu Qianqiu used the earth elemental art to sense the depth of the tomb. After diving down to a depth of 10 meters, he suddenly pointed with his finger. The soil in front of him parted, and a large hole appeared on the wall made of blood jade and red crystals. Immediately, a faint red light could be seen moving gently in front of him. Yu Qianqiu looked at it warily. He stepped aside to make way and said, "There's no danger in there, right?" Hong Tailong was speechless. He knew that this guy meant for him to go in and check first. He strode in and walked around. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, he shouted, "Come in. It's fine." Yu Qianqiu then swaggered in, while Xin Yu followed behind him in fear. He realized that every time he followed Yu Qianqiu had to do some unimaginable and scary things. The space inside the tomb was not small, and the lighting was good. The entire tomb's walls and floor were made of blood jade red crystals. Strands of red light shone down from the blood jade red crystals on the ceiling. They formed a fan shape and focused on a corpse in the center. It was a man's corpse, and he was also lying on a long bed made of blood jade red crystals. Yu Qianqiu and Xin Yu were still looking around, but Hong Tailong was already at the side of the long bed, trying to touch the corpse on it. Xin Yu didn't dare to move. Yu Qianqiu walked over to take a look. The man's corpse had a goat-like beard and a serene expression. It was as if he was sleeping, and he didn't look like a dead person at all. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but curiously poke his head over and asked, "What are you doing?" Hong Tailong pinched open the man's mouth and peeked inside. He then opened the eyelids to take a look. Then he clapped his hands and said with a curious expression, "The corpse is actually soft. There's a piercing wound in his heart, but I can see that the original wound was even bigger. It's obviously healing at an extremely slow speed. It seems that the legend about the mausoleum of the god of sin is true. There might really be a possibility of resurrection. If you don't believe me, come and touch it." He pointed at the corpse on the long bed to Yu Qianqiu. Chapter 1182. Motherf ****. I'm not as perverted as you. I've never had the hobby of touching corpses. Moreover, it's a corpse that has been dead for God knows how many years. How could you do it?" Yu Qianqiu spat in disgust. He had seen enough of the corpse's disgusting actions. However, he still couldn't help but poke it a few times to see if it was real or fake. Finding that it really was soft, he couldn't help but pinch the corpse's arm. He coughed and pulled his hand back. "I'm more concerned about how his cultivation base is preserved." The two stood in front of the corpse that had been dead for God knows how many years and chatted. They even touched each other. Jiu Yu subconsciously looked around and felt extremely horrified. Can you not always say one thing but mean another? Hong Tailong spat back. He then went straight to the point. Without giving Jiuyu a chance to refute, he said, "His cultivation seems to have been damaged. I heard that Hong Hua Star Lord was a late-stage great god back then. Now he's only a mid-stage great god. Try and see if you can use it." What were these two guys trying to do? Jiuyu stared at the two people who had their backs to him surrounding the corpse. Middle-stage great god. It's enough, it's enough. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the entire corpse with a beaming smile on his face. Then he patted Hong Tailong's chest with the back of his hand, hinting him to step aside. Then he circled around the long couch twice. No one knew what he was thinking, but he shook his head again and again. Suddenly, he waved his hand and a seven-colored flame enveloped the entire corpse. Then he closed his eyes and remained motionless. It was Shen Yu's first time seeing the seven-colored flame, and he was shocked. The flame that covered the corpse slowly melted under his claws until it became a ball floating in the air. There was a layer of grayish-white human-shaped ashes on the long bed of blood jade and red crystals, which was obviously left behind after the corpse was cremated. Yu Qianqiu suddenly opened his eyes. There were two leaping flames in his eyes. He flipped his 5 claws that were spewing out 7 colored flames. The already shrunken fireball was held in his palm, and it kept shrinking. When all the 7 colored flames had entered his palm, a sparkling and translucent purple bead was quietly lying on his palm. There was a faint red light inside the purple bead. So, the bead for a god-level cultivation base is purple. Yu Qianqiu looked at the bead in his palm and said excitedly, "Success." Hong Tailong flashed over to take a look. Shen Yu still did not understand what they were doing. "You'll know once you try." Yu Qianqiu threw the bead in his hand, and a 7-colored flame sprayed out from his palm. The purple bead spun in the 7-colored flame and quickly absorbed the flame. Gradually, a 3-meter-tall 7-colored flame man appeared. It looked like it was materializing. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Yu Qianqiu retracted the flame in his palm and exclaimed as he looked into the sky, "Damn it! He absorbed almost half of the Samadhi true fire in my body." The Samadhi true fire that can cover a radius of 500 meters was condensed into this. Hong Tailong and Shen Yu stared dumbfoundedly at the 3-meter-tall mighty fireman in the air. He was wearing a 7-colored fire armor and looked extremely lifelike. His pair of fiery golden eyes stared straight ahead without any emotion. The two of them could feel the terrifying power contained in this fire overlord's body. Wow. I, Hong Tailong, have my eyes opened. Hong Tailong's eyes lit up as he shook his head and exclaimed, "A flame man with Samadhi true fire as a body and a mid-stage god-level cultivation base. This thing is really scary." With a thought from Yu Qianqiu, the flame man teleported down and waved his palm like a knife across the long bed made of blood jade and red crystal. It was easily cut in half like a knife cutting through tofu. There wasn't even a sound. The 7-colored flame man suddenly raised his head and looked at Hong Tailong. Hong Tailong was shocked and immediately felt something was wrong. He flashed behind Yu Qianqiu and shouted angrily, "You want to use me as an experiment? I'm warning you, don't make such a joke. You'll die." Yu Qianqiu chuckled. He did have such an idea, but since he had been seen through, it would hurt his feelings to scare him again. He raised his hand and opened his claw. The 7-colored flame man immediately dispersed into Samadhi true fire and was absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's body. Finally, the purple bead was in his hand. He looked at it admiringly before putting it away. Hong Tailong walked out from behind him with lingering fear and asked, "What's this thing called?" "The fire of water, fire, metal, wood and earth. It should be called Fire Soul Mystic Weapon." Yu Qianqiu smiled proudly. With such a treasure to protect him, he wouldn't have to fear anything in the 3 realms. Hong Tailong clicked his tongue enviously and said, "That means there's still Water Soul Mystic Weapon, Gold Soul Mystic Weapon, Wood Soul Mystic Weapon, and Earth Soul Mystic Weapon. Theoretically, it should be like this. Snow Emperor's one is called Ice Soul Mystic Weapon." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said with pity, "If I'm able to devour the other 4 great spirits, then coupled with the myriad of tombs within this mausoleum, I'll be able to refine the 5-element dark weapons. Who in the 3 dimensions would be able to stop me then?" Jiuyu, who was at the side, was shocked. He understood everything now. He had seen the Ice Soul Mystic Ice of the Great Snowy Mountain. Obviously, Yu Qianqiu had obtained the secret method to refine mystic weapons from Snow Emperor. What shocked him the most was that Yu Qianqiu had set his sights on the 10 million divine tombs in the mausoleum of the god of sin. If he succeeded, wouldn't he have to refine 10 million divine-level dark weapons? Hee. Not to mention the 3 realms, with so many divine-grade profound weapons. Even in the god realm, they would be able to sweep through a region. Hong Tailong rubbed his hands excitedly and said, "Didn't your master kill quite a few tomb guardians? You probably don't know that we'll find a few good tombs in other places and empty them. Back then, our coiling dragon ancestor killed the wind god of the 12 ancient gods. The body of the wind god is also buried here. That's a terrifying expert with the cultivation of a late-stage ancient god. Don't you want to refine him into a mystic weapon?" That wretched smile on his face was filled with the feeling of enticing people to commit a crime. It was obvious that he was very interested in stealing. No wonder he was in cahoots with the myriad swords demon monarch, Yi Tiankong. One of the 12 ancient gods. Late-stage ancient god. Yu Qianqiu and Xinyu both cried out in surprise. The former's eyes were even brighter. He had heard of the wind god's great name before. That was one of the top 12 experts since the creation of the world. If he could refine him into a mystic weapon, he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the divine realm. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva with difficulty. His expression suddenly froze and he asked suspiciously, "Hong Tailong, the tomb of a figure like the wind god must be guarded by an expert. I wonder what their cultivation is like." The smile on Hong Tailong's face froze and he said awkwardly, "I heard that the people guarding the tomb of the wind god are his left and right envoys. They are called Tianfeng and Difeng. Their cultivation had reached early stage ancient god a long time ago. I wonder what level their cultivation is now, hee. What are you laughing at?" Yu Qianqiu snorted and asked, "Digging the tomb of the wind god is no problem. But who can handle the 2 ancient god experts? You or me? Damn it. Even if you want to die, this is not the way to do it." Even Jiu couldn't help but roll his eyes at Hong Tailong, hee. "Even if we can't dig the tomb of the wind god, we can still dig the tomb of others." Hong Tailong didn't give up and said, "Now that you have a mid-stage great god fire soul mystic weapon, you should be able to handle ordinary mid-stage great god tomb guards. Even if you can't, you should be able to stall them. It's enough for you to dig the tomb. Think about it. For a tomb guard of a mid-stage great god expert, the tomb master's cultivation is probably almost at the ancient god level. You can get a few more ancient god level mystic weapons and use them to deal with Tianfeng and Difeng. Won't you be able to dig the tomb of the wind god in the end?" As he spoke, he even made a move to take drastic measures. Towards this immoral idea, Xinyu lowered his head and looked at the ground without any expression. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, nodded in agreement. "That makes sense. But I'm afraid it's not possible now." Hong Tailong said unwillingly, "Why?" "It's very simple. First, the tomb guards here have already been alerted by my master. I'm afraid that they have already linked up. If we're not careful, we might run into their hands. Sigh. My master messing around is equivalent to ruining our plans. Second, although this fire soul mystic weapon is powerful, it needs enough fire to boost its power. The true samadhi fire stored in my body can only be used to scare people. It might be fine against ordinary experts, but it definitely can't support him to fight with a real expert. Otherwise, once he is defeated, he won't be able to revive in time. At that time we'll be in trouble. Jiu and I saw this with our own eyes at the Great Snowy Mountain. Third, with the terrain here, if we really want to do something, only the Earth Soul mystic weapon can unleash its full power. If I can devour the Earth Spirit, it'll be much safer." "Earth Spirit." Hong Tailong scratched his head and said gloomily, "Where are we going to find the Earth Spirit at this time?" Hee. Yu Qianqiu laughed sinisterly and said, "Unfortunately, I've heard Demon King 3 Knights say that he has an Earth Spirit under him. If we want to find an Earth Spirit, I'm afraid we'll have to find trouble with Demon King 3 Knights. Also, I've long wanted to make a move on Jin Tai's Gold Spirit, but I haven't had the chance. Now is the time to do it together." "Good." Hong Tailong clapped his hands and praised. "I'm also going to find Jin Tai to settle the score. Let's go and find him now. Yu Qianqiu nodded and turned to look at Jiuyu with a smile. Jiuyu, this celestial barrier is very deceitful. I'm embarrassed to trouble you to come and fetch us all the time. Why don't you come with us? That way, it'll be convenient for everyone. What do you think? Jiuyu was speechless. He wanted to refuse, but was there any use in refusing? If you don't say anything, I'll take it as you agree. Yu Qianqiu directly made the decision for him. With a wave of his hand, the three of them instantly disappeared from the tomb. After the three of them returned to the underground base of the Divine Ruin Realm, Yu Qianqiu arranged for Jiuyu to stay in a karst cave deep in the base. Wei Chuanqiu, Yinpeng, and Bai Suzhen were all cultivating there. There was also underground water for Jiuyu, the muscle spirit, to take a bath. At the same time, Wei Chuanqiu and Yinpeng received a hint from Yu Qianqiu that Jiuyu was very important to him, and that nothing should happen to him. In fact, he was under house arrest. Chapter 1183. Inside the underground karst cave, Shenyu, who was under house arrest, was not afraid at all. Instead, he heaved a sigh of relief. For him, being able to find a secluded place to cultivate in peace was better than anything else. He really didn't want to follow Yu Qianqiu and take risks. In his memory, as long as he followed Yu Qianqiu, there was never a time when he wasn't on tenterhooks. Everything he did was unimaginable and frightening. The underground karst cave was full of twists and turns, and the space was quite large. Yu Qianqiu had said that as long as he didn't leave this place, no one would restrict his freedom. Thus, he turned into the depths of a winding passageway and settled down. He had also thought it through. Since he had nowhere to reason with, he might as well obediently serve Yu Qianqiu. It was nothing more than going in and out of the boundary of heavens a few more times. As long as he did his part, based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu after being in contact with him for so long, Yu Qianqiu would not do anything to him. Hong Tailong walked around the huge underground karst cave with his hands clasped behind his back. He had no interest in Yu Qianqiu's trivial matters. Yu Qianqiu was negotiating with Wei Chuanqiu and Yinpeng when his gaze suddenly stopped on the stone wall of the karst cave opposite the underground river. A beautiful woman in fluttering white clothes was looking at him gently with a faint smile. Cough cough. That's it, Yu Qianqiu said and directly flashed to the opposite entrance of the cave. Bai Suzhen gently held his hand. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then they turned around and entered the cave together. Wei Chuanqiu and Yinpeng looked at each other. The former blew his beard and glared at him. What a guy who only cares about the opposite sex. Inside the cave where Bai Suzhen cultivated, there was a clean long couch. Yu Qianqiu was lying comfortably on it with his head resting on the thigh of a beauty. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Bai Suzhen, who was stroking his face and smiling at him. He asked, "Why did you stop cultivating? Did we disturb you?" Bai Suzhen shook her head and said with a smile, "I couldn't hear your voices even after setting up a soundproof enchantment. I just wanted to take a walk after I finished cultivating and saw you." "Oh, so that was how it was. By the way, there's something I want to tell you." Yu Qianqiu lay on her lap and told her about what had happened recently, especially about how all the cultivators in the human world had been wiped out. Then he stared at the expression on Bai Suzhen's face without blinking. Bai Suzhen frowned, then nodded slightly and said, "I understand what you mean. When you think it's appropriate, let's go back to my home and move my Snow Fox clan to a safe place." Yu Qianqiu didn't know what to say to this considerate confidant. He raised his hand and grabbed the hand that was caressing his face. A naughty smile suddenly appeared on his face as he said, "I think it's time for our relationship to take another step forward." Take another step forward? Bai Suzhen was startled. For a moment, she didn't know what he meant. Yu Qianqiu's finger had already gently touched the bulge of her heart. Then he pressed his entire palm on it. Bai Suzhen immediately understood what he meant. A blush appeared on her face, and a hint of shyness flashed through her eyes. Bending her soft waist, she lowered her head and took the initiative to press her lips against Yu Qianqiu's. The warmth of the other party's body and the attractive aura on their lips immediately ignited the lust in their hearts. Seeing that she agreed, Yu Qianqiu's beastly nature instantly erupted. He suddenly flipped over and placed Bai Sujin on the bed. Bai Sujin let out a moan. Their mouths couldn't be separated. Their tongues tangled together, and his hands were groping all over Bai Sujin's body. Just as he pulled open Bai Sujin's clothes, revealing her snow-white skin, his hand touched her soft and smooth skin. Before he could reach in, he suddenly heard Hong Tailong's loud voice coming from outside. "Yu Qianqiu, where did you go?" This voice was so loud that even the people outside the base could hear it. F***ck. Yu Qianqiu suddenly raised his head and looked at the beautiful woman who was panting under him. He threw caution to the wind and said, F***ck. Let's not care about him. Let's get down to business first. Just as he laid down again, Bai Sujin suddenly couldn't help but burst out laughing. She reached out her hand to support his body and said, "You go do what you need to do first. I can't relax with someone outside. Next time come and find me. We'll find a quiet place." What she meant was that this time, there was no atmosphere. The swan meat that he could finally taste after waiting for such a long time was scared away by someone. Yu Qianqiu instantly jumped up with a face full of grief and indignation. He quickly walked out, and his angry roar came from outside. "Hong Tailong, you uncultured thing. I was doing something very important, but I was interrupted by a beast like you." Bai Sujin sat up on the bed and tidied up her messy clothes. When she heard Yu Qianqiu yelling at someone outside, she couldn't help but giggle. She tidied up her hair and walked out. Hong Tailong, who had been scolded to the point that his head was spinning, finally waited for Yu Qianqiu to take a breather. He said with a stunned expression, "What did I interrupt you for?" Just as he finished speaking, his gaze paused on the hole in the stone wall in front of him. He saw a beautiful woman in white standing there, and nodding at him as a greeting. That was the place where Yu Qianqiu came out from. Wei Chuanqiu, Yun Peng, and Shen Yu stuck their heads out from 3 different directions and looked in their direction. Hong Tailong instantly realized that he had ruined their plan. He slapped his forehead and said, "So you're just sharpening your axe to cut firewood? I was wrong. I was wrong. You continue with your important business. I'll leave. I promise I won't disturb you anymore." He waved his hand repeatedly to signal Yu Qianqiu to go back, then turned around and left. F***cku. Yu Qianqiu cursed loudly. He wanted nothing more than to go over and give him 2 kicks. The atmosphere was already ruined. What was the use of you leaving? Hong Tailong pretended not to hear anything. He buried his head in a hole and crawled into it. He faced the wall and drew circles with his index finger. He kept mumbling, I was wrong. Right at this moment, Zhang Peng quickly dashed into the karst cave from the outside. He also heard Hong Tailong shout and knew that his master had returned. It just so happened that he had something to talk to him about. Who knew that he would see his master so angry the moment he arrived? He stood at the entrance of the cave, not knowing what to do or what was going on. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Zhang Peng. He knew that he wouldn't come here for no reason. Therefore, he suppressed his anger and temporarily put Hong Tailong's matter aside. He walked over and asked, "What's the matter?" Zhang Peng was stunned. He immediately remembered why he was looking for his master. He quickly replied, "When Rui wanted to look for you a few times, but unfortunately he never met you." "When Rui?" Yu Qianqiu paused and frowned. "When Rui from the Wenlanfeng clan?" "Yes." Zhang Peng nodded. Yu Qianqiu asked curiously, "Why is he looking for me? Let's go. Let's go take a look." The master and disciple flew out together. In the base's conference room, Yu Qianqiu didn't have to wait long before Zhang Peng brought Wen Rui over. When Wen Rui saw Yu Qianqiu, he quickly bowed and said, "Greetings, torture envoy." "Haha, we're all acquaintances. Take a seat." Yu Qianqiu sat on the seat of honor. He asked curiously, "I heard that you've been looking for me a few times. What's the matter?" When Rui didn't sit, he walked up to him and cupped his hands. "I've been trying to find out something, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to find out anything. Therefore, I'd like to ask the torture envoy." Yu Qianqiu's eyes flickered. He could roughly guess what Wen Rui wanted to ask, but he still wore a faint smile on his face. "Ask away. There's no need to be so reserved. Then I'll be presumptuous." Wen Rui cupped his hands again and said, "Here's the thing. There are hundreds of cultivators from the one clan. Everyone knows that ancestor when Lanfeng has left with you, torture envoy. But this time we didn't even get to see him. Everyone really misses him. So they asked me to ask the torture envoy where our ancestor has gone. Or has something happened to him? Yu Qianqiu sat up straight and tapped his fingers on the table. To be honest, I don't know where your ancestor has gone. When I was still in the mystic Immortal city, your ancestor found me. He said that he wanted to regain his dignity in front of Lu Yanqing. You should know that your ancestor has deep feelings for Valley Master Lu, so he left to cultivate alone. I've been looking for him often, but unfortunately, I haven't heard from him yet. I'm also worried that something might have happened to him. So that's how it is. When Rui bowed, a thoughtful expression on his face. After a while, he looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. Speak your mind. I'll definitely help you if I can solve any problems. Yu Qianqiu didn't finish his sentence. He wondered if the One Clan didn't have the upper hand in the military competition system. So they wanted to find Wen Lanfeng to support them. If that was the case, he would have to reason with him. Unexpectedly, when Rui hesitated for a while and cupped his hands. I have a presumptuous request. I hope the torture envoy can agree to it. Tell me what it is first. Yu Qianqiu smiled gently. Well, when Rui was a little embarrassed. To tell you the truth, the ancestor is the backbone of the One Clan. Hundreds of clansmen want to find the ancestor, and have been urging me to do so. I'm wondering, can the torture envoy allow me to go to the Immortal realm to inquire about the ancestor? You want to leave this place alone? Yu Qianqiu's smile froze, then he smiled faintly again. It's not that I don't want to promise you, but the Immortal realm is currently in a time where the demonic Tao is running rampant. It's too dangerous for you to go out alone. I'm afraid that once you leave this place, you'll most likely die. When Lanfeng is no longer here, so I have to be responsible for your safety. When Rui thought that this would be enough to make the other party retreat, but unexpectedly, when Rui plopped down on his knees and kowtowed sobbing. When Rui has been entrusted by hundreds of clansmen to find the ancestor. Whether the ancestor is dead or alive, as long as there's news of the ancestor, we'll be at ease. As long as I can inquire about the ancestor's whereabouts. When Rui's insignificant life is nothing. Even if I die, it won't be regretted. Yu Qianqiu was taken aback. Just a moment ago, he had hardened his heart and had some killing intent. However, when a man like him knelt down and cried on the spot, he immediately felt apologetic. Thus, he felt pity for him and quickly got up to help him up. Get up. I understand your difficulties and your feelings. Such loyalty is commendable. How can I refuse you? How about this? Go back and make some preparations. When I leave, I'll take you with me. How about that? Chapter 1184. After when Rui left, Zhang Peng looked at his master in confusion. He felt that this was not his master's character. He didn't know if his master had other plans, so he approached and asked, Master, are you really going to let him leave here alone? What he meant was the old rule. If it was inconvenient for him to be the bad guy, then he would be the scapegoat. He was used to being the scapegoat anyway, so he didn't mind taking one more. For example, Nongzhu almost fell out with him last time because of the Jasper Flower Fairy. However, Zhang Peng was now in power and decisive. His millions of troops only needed an order to attack immediately. Zhang Peng's face darkened, and Nongzhu couldn't do anything to him. After all, he wasn't Yu Qianqiu, and he wasn't familiar with him. He wouldn't give him a chance to scold and order him around. Zhang Peng was ready to get rid of Wen Rui as long as Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu, who was standing with his hands behind his back, thought of the Snow Empress and her husband in the Great Snow Mountain. He shook his head slightly and sighed. Let him go. After all, they are all acquaintances in the human world. I don't want to lose the last bit of old affection. He really didn't want to gain more and lose more. He sighed with emotion and a rare compassion. Zhang Peng had grown up on the battlefield and was used to living on the edge of a knife. His understanding of soft-heartedness was even more thorough than his master's. Once he discovered someone who was dangerous to the overall situation, He wouldn't even blink when he saw blood splattering everywhere. He frowned and said, "What if he leaks the location of our base after leaving?" "So what?" Yu Qianqiu, who was facing the wall in deep thought, turned around and said confidently, "The base is in the ruins of God. Even if Sanyi knows we are inside, what can he do to us? The ruins of God is still too early to open. I don't think they can do anything to us. Besides, if Wenrui is really a disloyal person, keeping him around is more dangerous than letting him go." Yes, this disciple understands. If there is nothing else, this disciple will take his leave. Zhang Peng respectfully retreated. Although he appeared to be obeying, he still felt that something was wrong. For him, as the commander of an army, if he did not plan for the overall situation, he would not be able to plan for a region. And if he did not plan for 10,000 generations, he would not be able to plan for a moment. This was also what his master had told him, and he had always believed it. Therefore, he had to be ready to deal with unexpected events at any time. Moreover, the world of cultivation was different from the mortal world. There were countless strange things happening, and nothing was absolute. If there was an emergency and he didn't handle it well, then he would be derelict in his duty. However, he still obeyed his master's decision unconditionally. However, he was prepared to make the best preparations within the scope of his authority. He decided to adjust the defense of the army so that he would not be caught off guard if an accident happened. Not long after Zhang Peng left, Nongzhu burst in again. As soon as she saw Yu Qianqiu, she pounded the table and yelled, "Yu Qianqiu, what do you mean? What's wrong? Why are you throwing such a tantrum? Who provoked you?" Yu Qianqiu pretended not to know the answer. "Cut it out. Don't tell me you don't know about Qianghua." Nongzhu told him what had happened. It turned out that after Qianghua Fairy was taken away by Zhang Peng, Qianghua Fairy told Ziyi that they were mother and daughter when he was in a coma. Now Ziyi looked sad when she saw him and ignored him. Ah, how could such a thing happen? Yu Qianqiu was surprised. He spread out his hands and said, "I really don't know. I'm sure it has nothing to do with me." Bullshit. Nongzhu kicked over the chair and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose. She scolded, "No one else knows about the thing between me and Qianghua except you. It's no wonder that you didn't instruct her. Now Ziyi doesn't care about me anymore. If you don't solve this problem, I won't let you go." Yu Qianqiu waved his hand with a solemn expression, indicating that he really wasn't the one who ordered this. Suddenly he frowned and said, "I understand. I told Zhang Peng about your relationship with Fairy Jade Flower, and asked him to take care of Fairy Jade Flower. Actually, I had good intentions. Later you were injured, so I asked Zhang Peng to arrange a careful woman to take care of you. Did that bastard take Qianghua Fairy to you?" "You." Nongzhu pointed at him and didn't know what to say. She also didn't know whether this guy was telling the truth or not. Although she felt that it was reasonable and could be true, she knew Yu Qianqiu too well. She always believed only 30% of the words that came out of his mouth. "Don't be angry. It really has nothing to do with me. Of course, I won't shirk my responsibility. I'll give you a satisfactory explanation." Yu Qianqiu walked over with a gloomy face and a faint murderous intent. He said in a low voice, "That Qianghua Fairy is so hateful. We can't vent our hatred if we don't teach her a lesson. How about this? I'll personally talk to Ziyi and tell her that Jasper Flower Fairy is a person with ulterior motives. I'll let Zhang Peng deal with the trouble he caused. I'll let Zhang Peng use military law to pry open her mouth and make her beg for death. I guarantee that she'll personally tell Ziyi that she lied to her before. What do you think?" Nongzhu was speechless. He sensed Yu Qianqiu's killing intent, and did not doubt that this cruel and merciless guy would kill Qianghua Fairy. But to be honest, after all, they had been husband and wife for one night. Nongzhu did not want to torture Qianghua Fairy to the point where she begged for death. But he still said stubbornly, "Keep pretending." Then he swung his sleeves and left. "Alas! Don't go." Yu Qianqiu chased after him and shouted, "I'm telling the truth. If you don't believe me, I'll tell Zhang Peng first. If you want, you can ask Zhang Peng to deal with it. Get out of here." Nongzhu turned around and spat on his face, then left. Yu Qianqiu wiped the spittle off his face and hummed a Beijing opera song. I was watching the mountain scenery from the tower when I heard the chaos outside the city. Flags fluttered in the air, but it turned out to be the soldiers sent by General Sima. With his hands behind his back, he walked back proudly. In the main bedroom of the backyard of the passionless palace in the mystic Immortal city, a woman's blood-boiling moan kept ringing. Sometimes it was low, sometimes it was loud and clear. After the violent crash, the muscular, naked Demon King 3 Knights lay down on the bed in a relaxed manner. The Demon King's charming eyes were like silk as she stretched out her curvaceous and proud white body. After cleaning the Demon King 3 Knights, she laid down on his chest and asked softly, "Demon King, you're a good girl. I heard news from the underworld that Bai Qi has gone missing. What's going on?" He's looking for trouble. When the time comes, don't blame me for breaking my promise." The Demon King of 3 Knights' eyes flickered. He raised his hand and lifted the goose egg-like white chin on his chest. He smiled faintly and said, "Could it be that you're sleeping next to me, but you're thinking of Bai Qi? The two of you seem to have loved each other to death. Could it be that you still have feelings for him?" The Demon King of Azure Sky pushed his hand away and lay back on the bed. She snorted coldly and said, "I've already cut off all ties with him. If it wasn't for the Demon King's promise, just because he sealed me in the demon realm for so many years, I would have torn him to pieces." It was only when they were on the bed that she dared to make a move on the Demon King of 3 Knights. "Oh." The Demon King of 3 Knights gave a non-committal "oh." Suddenly, Uniquely knocked on the door and shouted, "Demon King." The Demon King of 3 Knights pushed the Demon King of Azure Sky away and got off the bed. The Demon King of Azure Sky hurriedly got up and helped him put on his armor and cloak. He watched as the Demon King of 3 Knights strode out. Then he slowly took a few steps back and sat on the bed with his butt bare. He seemed to have lost something. Suddenly, he heard the conversation outside mention Yan Zhuixing. He immediately came to his senses and quickly put on his clothes. In the courtyard outside, the Demon King of 3 Knights suddenly turned around and asked. He said he came from the human realm and just escaped from the hands of the ruins of God realm Yu Qianqiu. "He's Vice Palace Lord Yan's servant?" Uniquely bowed slightly and said, "Yes. I've checked. He was indeed affected by the demon eye ecstasy. It shouldn't be fake. All the passages leading to the human realm have been cut off. I thought that Yu Qianqiu wanted to stay in the human realm and not interfere with the matters of our demonic path army. I didn't think that he would actually hide in the ruins of God realm." The Demon King of 3 Knights sneered and said, "Bring that person to see me. Also, bring Vice Palace Lord Yan over to confront him." Uniquely quickly left and brought Yan Zhuixing and Wen Rue over not long after. Yan Zhuixing had already recovered to his original state. He had suffered a great loss in the demon realm and had his physical body destroyed. If not for the miraculous demonic arts and the 3 Knights and the others helping him find a suitable body to take over, he probably wouldn't have recovered so quickly. As for Wen Rue, because he had long been controlled by Yan Zhuixing's demon eye, after thinking of ways to get Yu Qianqiu to be sent out of the ruins of God realm, he immediately found the people of the demon realm and declared that he was Yan Zhuixing's subordinate. When the people of the demon realm heard that he was Vice Palace Lord Yan's subordinate, they didn't dare to delay and immediately arranged for him to be sent over to verify. When the master and servant met, Yan Zhuixing had already asked about Wen Rue's situation on the way here, so he already had an understanding of the situation. After arriving at the backyard, the two of them bowed to the Demon King of 3 Knights. Wen Rue then gave a detailed answer to the Demon King of 3 Knights' questions about the situation in the ruins of God realm. Just what kind of mystical treasure is it, to actually be able to travel back and forth between the 3 realms at will? The Demon King of 3 Knights' eyes flickered and said, "No wonder the passage to the human realm was sealed, and Yu Qianqiu was still able to run to the already sealed ruins of God realm." The Azure Sky Great Demon King had already tidied himself up and stood quietly behind him. For a woman to be able to come out of the Demon King of 3 Knights' bedroom, it was obvious what she had done before. Yan Zhuixing couldn't help but take a few more glances, but what he was most worried about was that the human realm was sealed. There were still people he cared about there. However, There were some secrets that he didn't want to completely confess, so he impatiently cupped his hands and said, "Demon King, my mother and sister are still in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Please think of a way to save them, Demon King." Of course. The Demon King of Three Knights nodded, then tilted his head slightly and said, "That sealed ruins of God realm, Jin Tai should know better than us." Eunuch Li understood what he meant. He wanted to find Jin Tai, so he bowed slightly and left. Chapter 1185. Jin Tai, who had been summoned, felt apprehensive. He did not know why the Demon Lord had summoned him, but he did not dare delay and rushed over as fast as he could. Demon Lord Three Knights stared at Jin Tai and said indifferently, "Back when my devil path dominated the three realms, I had never heard of the Divine Ruin Realm. Tell me in detail what this Divine Ruin Realm is." "Yes." Jin Tai bowed and glanced at the people present. He was a little curious in his heart, but he still answered honestly. Although the Divine Ruin Realm and the Netherworld Divine Palace are located in the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld respectively, they are actually similar. It's just that the Netherworld Divine Palace was created by the Coiling Dragon God, while the Divine Ruin Realm was created by the Phoenix God. There are all kinds of fierce beasts in the Divine Ruins Realm, and their cultivations are all different. The one with the highest cultivation is a rainbow-feathered Lion King with a cultivation similar to mine, and he is the current lord of the Divine Ruins Realm. When I fought with him back then, he was slightly weaker than me, but I was also unable to kill him. Created by the Phoenix God? Demon Lord Three Knights pondered for a moment, then asked, "Do you have any way to enter the Divine Ruin Realm?" Jin Tai answered truthfully. "The passage to the Divine Ruin Realm is a bit strange. It only opens once every 100 years, and there is still some time before it opens again. If you want to enter, you will have to wait until it opens again. This subordinate has no other way to enter. I didn't call you here to listen to your refusal. I wanted you to think of a way." Demon Lord Three Knights' eyes flashed with red light. "I let you rule the immortal world for so many years, yet you can't even do such a small thing. What's the difference between you and trash? What's the use of keeping you?" Jin Tai trembled in fear. Just as he was about to beg, his eyes suddenly moved and he revealed a look of joy. Reporting to the Demon Lord, "Although I have no way to enter, there is someone who might have a way. However, I cannot invite that person. I'm afraid the Demon Lord will have to find him personally." Yan Zhuixing's eyes also lit up as he looked at Three Knights with some hope. "Oh, who is so arrogant that I have to personally invite him?" Demon Lord Three Knights said. "Don't beat around the bush, just say who it is." "Old Man Mu of the Ancient Forest." Jin Tai observed his expression and said, "Back then, the reason why I was able to deal with that Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was because he gave me pointers in the Divine Ruin Realm, allowing me to find the Phoenix Plume and refine the Soul Transformation Smoke. In this subordinate's opinion, he should be very familiar with the Divine Ruin Realm." "Mu Yuanzi." Demon Monarch Three Knights muttered to himself. After seeing Yan Zhuixing's hopeful gaze, he closed his eyes and said, "All right. It's settled then, Kinta. Come with me to the ancient forest." Kintai's expression stiffened, and he immediately panicked. He didn't expect that Sanyi would ask him to go with him. He immediately cursed Bai Qi in his heart. Why did he drag Old Man Mu into this? If they confronted each other later, wouldn't he die a horrible death? He had thought that as long as he didn't face Old Man Mu, he would have a million reasons to convince the Demon Lord of Three Knights that Old Man Mu was lying if he asked about it later. Given his temper, if he couldn't deal with Old Man Mu, he wouldn't have gone to look for Old Man Mu again and again. However, there was no other way. Demon Monarch Three Knights did as he said. After instructing Eunuch Li to guard the house well, he flung his scarlet cloak and flew away. Kintai didn't dare to hesitate, and could only bite the bullet and chase after him. However, he already had an idea in his mind. He had the thought that it was better for him to die than for himself. Anyway, he wasn't the one who said it. He was prepared to push all the blame onto Bai Qi and think of a way to protect himself first. After the people in the courtyard dispersed, Yan Zhuixing led Wenrui back to his heavily guarded mountain. He had just instructed Wenrui to settle down, and was about to return to his room to wait for news from Demon Monarch 3 Knights when a guard ran in and reported, "Demon Monarch Qing Tian requests to see you." "Oh, quickly invite him in," Yan Juexing ordered. He waited for a while before slowly walking out to welcome him. Although Demon Monarch Qing Tian was an old minister of the devil world and had a higher cultivation than him, he didn't want others to see that he was eager to curry favor with him. Before he walked out of the inner courtyard, Demon Monarch Qing Tian walked over with a smile. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Vice Palace Lord." Yan Juexing cupped his hands politely and said, "May I know what advice Lord Qing Tian has for me?" How would this subordinate dare to give advice to Vice Palace Lord Yan? The Demon King of Qing Tian stroked his hair and said with a concerned expression, "I heard that the Vice Palace Master was frightened previously. I don't know if this physical body is suitable for you to possess. I'm proficient in a set of techniques, and I'm willing to help the Vice Palace Master loosen up your bones." After saying that, he looked around. Seeing that there was no one else around, he directly walked past Yan Juexing and entered his room. He waved his hand and said, "Vice Palace Lord, quickly come and lie down on the bed." Yan Juexing was momentarily confused by her. He thought that she had something secretive to report. Who knew that just as he entered the room with a heavy heart, Demon Monarch Qing Tian closed the door and pulled Yan Juexing to press him down on the bed, really letting him massage him. "What are you doing?" Yan Juexing was shocked. Who knew that there was still more to come? Just as he was about to get up, Demon Monarch Qing Tian had already taken off her clothes and was on top of him. Yan Juexing flipped over and pushed her away. He flashed to the door and opened it. Standing at the door to prove that he was open and aboveboard, he said, "Lord Qing Tian, please leave quickly. I can pretend that I don't know anything." Demon Monarch Qing Tian laid on the bed and giggled seductively. "Vice Palace Lord, what are you afraid of? I have been serving Lord Devil God all the way until Devil King 3 Knights. My responsibility is to serve every generation's Devil King well. Vice Palace Lord will ascend to the Devil King's throne sooner or later, so there's no need to hold back. Even if Devil King knows, he won't say anything. Otherwise, Qing Tian wouldn't dare to disturb you." Yan Juexing had long heard of Demon Monarch Qing Tian's beauty. Although he knew that she had countless men in her bedchamber, and although his heart was moved by this woman, he wouldn't touch Devil King 3 Knights woman before he ascended to the Devil King's throne. Who knew if she was sent to test him? He cupped his hands and said, "I still have some things to do. Lord Qing Tian, please do as you wish." After saying that, he quickly left. After Yu Qianqiu brought Wen Rui to the celestial realm, they separated. He didn't know that Wen Rui had already betrayed him. In order to not alert the enemy in the celestial realm, and to avoid directly going against Devil King 3 Knights, Yu Qianqiu and Hong Tailong secretly captured a few people from the Devil Dao to interrogate them. They didn't manage to get any information about the Earth Spirit. It seemed like they didn't know who the Earth Spirit was. However, they did get information that Jin Tai was in the illusory Immortal City, in the underground space created by the Earth Art. Hong Tailong directly killed a captive that didn't get any information. He turned around and asked, "What do we do? It seems like we still have to find high-level people from the Devil Dao to ask about the Earth Spirit's whereabouts. However, if we make a move, we will definitely alert others. We can't capture these small shrimps silently. We might be surrounded and attacked by other experts. Or we might have to face Devil King 3 Knights directly. Should we run further away and capture a Devil Dao expert in the Netherworld to ask? F***CK. Since we know where Jin Tai is, let's go to the illusory Immortal City to investigate. If we can capture Jin Tai, we should be able to ask him who the Earth Spirit is." Yu Qianqiu stared at him and asked, "Do you dare to come with me? What am I afraid of?" Hong Tailong patted his chest heroically. However, his aura instantly weakened as he reminded, "If you can't win, you must remember to bring me along when you run. You worry too much. If something happens and I really can't save you in time, you can just bring Yi Tiankong out to protect yourself." Yu Qianqiu snickered. "You really plan on leaving me behind if something happens?" Hong Tailong was a little anxious. "How could I? I promise I won't abandon you. I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been a man of my word. Once I say it, it's a done deal. Yu Qianqiu guaranteed with his character. Oh my god. Don't scare me. I'm really not a match for Devil King 3 Knights. If you didn't say that, I would still be confident. But the moment you say it, I'm trembling in fear. This old dragon has personally seen you pull out the nail. Hong Tailong pulled him back and said anxiously, explain it clearly first. If you don't explain it clearly, I won't take that risk. Cut the crap. With a mid-stage Great God Fire Soul Mystic weapon. Are you still afraid that we won't have enough time to escape? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the two disappeared into the ground at the same time, in the center of the ancient forest. On top of the scarlet-red cliffs, a winding river quietly flowed above the exposed red rocks. The ancient language tree was covered with golden leaves like a golden umbrella. The nervous Jin Tai had been hoping that Devil King 3 Knights wouldn't be able to find Mu Yuanzi. However, when he saw Devil King 3 Knights flying in a certain direction, he immediately guessed that the other party probably had a way to find Mu Yuanzi. As expected, when he reached the ancient language tree, he saw Devil King 3 Knights standing there, slapping the ancient language tree repeatedly. The entire ancient language tree shook violently. Jin Tai didn't know why he was doing this, so he waited silently to the side. After a while, Devil King 3 Knights stopped slapping the tree, and slowly turned around to look behind him. Jin Tai suddenly turned around, and saw Mu Yuanzi walking out of a wall of light with a large wooden staff. Mu Yuanzi stared at Jin Tai and shouted, Jin Tai, how dare you ignore my words and come to my ancient forest? Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? Jin Tai hurriedly flashed behind Devil King 3 Knights, and stood with his hands behind his back. Devil King 3 Knights had brought him here to verify spiritual master Mu Yuanzi, so that he wouldn't find the wrong person. Seeing this, Jin Tai didn't need to ask any questions to know that this person was definitely the person he was looking for. He smiled faintly and said, when my devil Dao roamed the 3 realms, we always abided by our ancestors' teachings and didn't easily disturb the ancient forest. That's why Third Knight never had the chance to pay a visit to Senior Mu. I have no choice but to make a sudden visit this time. Please forgive me, Senior Mu. With this, Mu Yuanzi no longer paid attention to Jin Tai. Instead, he stared at Third Knight and said in a low voice, you're the third Devil King of the Devil World. Devil King 3 Knights? His tone was somewhat shocked. Glancing at Jin Tai, he faintly guessed that this guy had probably reopened the Devil World. That's right. Devil King 3 Knights cupped his hands slightly as a sign of respect. Chapter 1186. Mu Yuanzi stood there indifferently with his cane. Even the demon god of the past had to give him some face. He felt that 3 Knights' respect was only natural. He stood there and asked indifferently, what business does the demon lord have in my ancient forest? After so many years, 3 Knights had forgotten that there was someone who dared to put on airs in front of him. A faint red light appeared in his eyes, and he lost interest in pleasantries. However, he still had a faint smile on his face. I want to ask Senior Mu about something. 3 Knights has something to do in the Divine Ruin realm, but it's not time to open yet, so I want to ask Senior to show me a way in. Mu Yuanzi's cold gaze swept over Jin Tai, and then he snorted. With the Demon Lord's strength, unifying the 3 realms is not a problem. Do you want to even go to the Divine Ruin realm? Listen to my advice, greed will not end well. This was a warning. The smile on Demon Lord 3 Knights' face disappeared, and the scarlet cape fluttering in the wind instantly stopped. He said indifferently, I won't hide it from Senior. A pair of people use some unknown method to escape into the Divine Ruin realm. I must kill them, so I ask Senior to show me the way. Mu Yuanzi's expression changed slightly, and he said with a frown, is there someone in the 3 realms who knows how to open the Divine Ruin realm? Who? Yu Qianqiu. Demon Lord 3 Knights didn't hide anything. Yu Qianqiu? Mu Yuanzi froze, and then said in shock, how can he open the passage to the Divine Ruin realm? I don't know about this, but it seems that Senior Mu also knows Yu Qianqiu. Demon Lord 3 Knights' tone changed, and he said word by word. From Senior's words, you definitely know how to open the Divine Ruin realm. Please teach me. I don't know how to open the Divine Ruin Realm, so don't disturb me in the future, Mu Yuanzi said stiffly, and then turned to open the profound wave light wall to return to his Mu Killer Sea. Mu Yuanzi, don't refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. Demon Lord Three Knights' cold and threatening voice sounded behind him. Mu Yuanzi abruptly turned around and slammed the wooden staff in his hand into the ground. His eyes shone brightly as he shouted, "Even demonic god ye doesn't dare to be so rude to me. Since when did it become your turn to be so impudent?" Under the golden leaves of the ancient language tree, the scarlet cape suddenly fluttered in the wind. Demon Monarch Three Knights snorted coldly and said, "Mu Yuanzi, I won't beat around the bush with you." The ancestor, Lord Devil God, had crossed the mortal realm and god realm, and accepted a disciple in the lower realm. Previously, Lord Devil God had directly torn open the void and saved the disciple's life from the divine realm. Now that the disciple's parents had fallen into the hands of Yu Qianqiu, San Yi, as a descendant of Devil God, naturally had to share Devil God's burden. He couldn't let Lord Devil God personally take care of everything. This concerns Lord Devil God's face, so I, San Yi, have no choice but to help. What? Mu Yuanzi exclaimed when he heard this. He did not think that the demonic god would actually accept a disciple from the lower realm. And he did not think that the demonic god would directly come from the immortal world to help this disciple. Not to mention that this cultivation was too shocking. The demonic god's actions were even more shocking. Demon Monarch Three Knights snorted and continued, "If you are willing to help me, I, San Yi, will follow the old rules of the Night Clan and restrict the heroes of the Devil Dao from invading your ancient forest. But if you don't give me this face, then don't blame me for not caring about the feelings of the older generation. For Lord Devil God, I, San Yi, can do anything, and I will do it at any cost. Although your cultivation is higher than mine, you should know the power of my Devil God arts. If we fight, it's not certain who will win. If I want to destroy your ancient forest, it will only take an instant. You won't be able to do anything to me. I hope that Senior will reconsider and not force San Yi to do something he doesn't want to do." This was a completely naked threat, and also a final ultimatum. It was clearly telling Mu Yuanzi that he had to agree whether he wanted to or not. Hiding to the side, Jin Tai was secretly envious of Demon Monarch Three Knights' strength. He didn't know when he would have such an awe-inspiring moment. Mu Yuanzi's gaze was fixed on the unmoving Demon Monarch Three Knights. His expression was dark and gloomy. No one had ever threatened him like this in many years, but he knew that Demon Monarch Three Knights was speaking the truth. He had interacted with the Devil God before, so he naturally knew how terrifying the Devil God arts were. Although San Yi's cultivation was slightly lower than his, it was almost impossible for him to defeat San Yi. Moreover, he knew that there was an even more terrifying person behind San Yi. That person wore white robes and a white hat, and had been following Devil God Knight for a long time. His strength was extremely terrifying, but he was unusually low-key and loyal to the Night Clan. After some thought, Mu Yuanzi gave in. There was another important reason why he gave in. That was because he didn't have a good impression of Yu Qianqiu to begin with. Yu Qianqiu's wood elemental magic arts inexplicably made him feel a little apprehensive. Logically speaking, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation he shouldn't have felt this way, but every time he saw Yu Qianqiu, he would feel a little uneasy. Mu Yuanzi took out a jade archive, quickly injected something into it, and threw it to Demon Monarch Three Knights. He warned sternly, "I hope you keep your promise. Otherwise, this old man will make you regret it." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his staff and summoned a wall of light. His figure flashed into it, and the wall of light that rippled like water also disappeared. Demon Monarch Three Knights looked at the jade archive for a while, then slowly nodded. "So that's how it is. Come, let's go back." He transformed into a streak of light and quickly flew away. Jin Tai, on the other hand, was stunned. He didn't think that the two of them wouldn't talk about what he was worried about, because they didn't get along. He happily chased after him. Under the night sky, in illusory immortal city, Yu Qianqiu and Hong Tailong, who had killed 2 devil soldiers, changed into their clothes. They had more or less figured out the situation in illusory immortal city. The defenses here weren't as tight as they thought, because the demonic cultivators didn't believe that anyone from the netherworld or immortal realm would have the guts to come here and throw their lives away. Although they didn't manage to find out who the earth spirit was, they managed to find out the mountain where Jin Tai and Yan Juexing lived. The two of them hid underground. Yu Qianqiu gritted his teeth and said, "That bastard Yan Juexing really isn't dead yet. He'll definitely be a disaster if we let him live." "Then which one are you planning to make a move on?" Hong Tailong unnaturally tugged at his clothes that were a little too small. He frowned and said, "Don't blame me for not reminding you. Although the defenses here aren't tight, there are many experts here. If we make a move on one of them, we'll definitely alert the others. We won't have a chance to target the other one. Have you thought clearly about who to make a move on?" After some hesitation, Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Let's put aside the grudge between me and that bastard for now. Emotion's two attacks have already made me lose the confidence to kill him. Now that Jin Tai has been defeated by Demon Monarch 3 Knights, the mountain he lives in doesn't even have any subordinates or guards. It's a good opportunity for us to make a move. Let's go, we'll deal with Jin Tai first." "Alright. I think so too." Hong Tailong rubbed his palms together and said. The two of them emerged from the ground. In order to not arouse suspicion, they swaggered through the mountain range. When they found the mountain Jin Tai lived in, they discovered that there really weren't any guards inside or outside the manor. The two of them directly flew in. The moment they landed, Hong Tailong rolled his eyes and shouted with his throat pinched, "Jin Tai, Demon Monarch is looking for you. Jin Tai, Demon Monarch is looking for you." However, even after searching the entire manor twice, they couldn't find a single person. Hong Tailong pretended to be mysterious and shouted for a long time, but no one answered. Finally, they confirmed that Jin Tai wasn't here, or that he had left due to some matters. In the end, the two of them decided that if they couldn't find Jin Tai, they would take the opportunity to kill Yan Juexing. Thus, they found the mountain Yan Juexing lived in. However, the guards outside the manor were extremely tight. The two of them didn't dare to force their way in and alert the enemy. In the end, they sneakily used the earth art at the foot of the mountain and directly appeared in the manor at the top of the mountain. Demon King Qing Tian was still lying naked on Yan Juexing's bed, but she pulled a golden blanket to cover her body. She didn't believe that Yan Juexing wouldn't come back. This time, if she didn't take advantage of the fact that Demon Monarch 3 Knights wasn't here, she would definitely not stop. She was very confident in her body and didn't believe that Yan Juexing could keep rejecting her. Suddenly, he heard the sound of sneaky footsteps outside. The Azure Sky Demon King instantly covered his mouth and laughed. Who would dare to sneak around Vice Palace Head Yan's residence other than Yan Juexing? Who else could it be? Yan Juexing might even want to see if he was still there. He immediately chuckled and said, "Vice Palace Head Yan, the Demon Monarch has brought Jin Tai out. What are you afraid of? This servant is about to fall asleep from waiting. Come quickly." Yu Qianqiu and Hong Tailong, who were sneaking around in the courtyard, were instantly stunned. So Demon Monarch 3 Knights brought Jin Tai out. No wonder they couldn't find Jin Tai. This meant that Demon Monarch 3 Knights wasn't in the illusory Immortal City. Furthermore, they had a great god intermediate stage Fire Soul Mystic Soldier. What was there to be afraid of? The two of them exchanged delighted glances, and mistakenly thought that they had found the right place. Yan Juexing was having an affair in the house. Yu Qianqiu transmitted a message. "That bastard is sleeping with a woman inside. I will guard outside to prevent him from escaping. You will barge in and sneak attack him while he is distracted. You must use all your strength to kill him in one strike." As he spoke, he took out his god arrow in preparation. Hong Tailong smiled evilly and nodded. Without saying anything else, he directly broke through the window and entered. Suddenly, a woman's stern shout came from inside. "Who is it?" Boom! There was a loud explosion that shook the earth and the mountains. The house was instantly blasted into smithereens. Soil, rocks, and wood shavings flew everywhere. 2 streams of light shot into the sky. Hong Tailong looked at the other party with his mouth agape. He didn't expect that there was no one else in the room. It was just a naked woman. Furthermore, her cultivation was very high. In the sky, The completely naked demon monarch Qing Tian flashed with a green light. He had already put on a set of clothes, and his face was filled with killing intent. Yu Qianqiu knew that things weren't going well. Just as he was about to say that he had fallen into a trap and retreat, he suddenly heard Yan Zhuixing's voice shouting from the other side of the courtyard. "What's the matter?" He had already flown into the sky. All the guards had also quickly flashed into the sky. People from all directions immediately rushed over upon hearing the voice. "He is Yan Zhuixing. Quickly kill him." Yu Qianqiu pointed to the sky and shouted angrily. The god arrow in his hand had already turned into thousands of streams of light and shot out. Chapter 1187. When Yan Zhuixing heard this unforgettable voice, he was also shocked. When he looked down and saw his old foe, he cried out involuntarily, "Yu Qianqiu." He was truly afraid of Yu Qianqiu. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect Yu Qianqiu to actually dare to come here to assassinate him. Yu Qianqiu was too daring. When he saw the familiar 10,000 golden lights shooting over, he instantly shivered in fear. Without saying anything, he turned around and ran. Hong Tailong also didn't say anything and wanted to chase after him. The Clear Sky Great Demon King shouted, "Protect Vice Palace Lord Yan." His voice reverberated in all directions as he teleported to block Hong Tailong. In the blink of an eye, the two of them engaged in a fierce battle in the sky. Knowing that the Demon Lord Three Knights wasn't around, Yu Qianqiu's guts grew. The 10,000 golden lights were like his arms and fingers. He rushed into the group of people blocking him and slaughtered them. The 10,000 divine swords were unstoppable, and the people blocking him fled with their hands covering their heads. Yu Qianqiu's divine swords protected him, and was invincible. He instantly broke through the encirclement and shouted angrily, "Yan Zhuixing, stop right there." He immediately chased after him. He swore that he wouldn't stop until he killed him. "How dare you!" At this moment, experts rushed over from all directions and mercilessly joined hands to stop Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too low. Even with the divine swords in hand, he could only barely protect himself. He had no choice but to retract the 10,000 divine swords to protect himself. Boom! On the other side, the Clear Sky Great Demon King, who was fighting fiercely with Hong Tailong, suddenly exploded with countless wooden roots. The sky was filled with nowhere to hide, and it directly wrapped around Hong Tailong. Roar! A dragon's roar shook the 9 heavens. Bang! Countless wooden roots were blasted away. A 2,000 feet long red dragon was incomparably majestic. It danced in the sky in a shocking manner. At the same time, a stream of light passed through the countless wooden roots in the dragon's claw, and a golden chain directly wrapped around the Clear Sky Great Demon King's neck. Dragon! Cries of surprise could be heard from all around. The Azure Sky Devil King's expression changed even more. She used all her strength, but still could not break free from the dragon binding rope. On the roof of the Heartless Palace's former branch, Eunuch Li, who was dressed in white and wearing a white hat, stood with his hands behind his back as he looked over. After seeing the giant red dragon, his calm pupils constricted a little. Yan Zhuixing, who was hiding beside him, heaved a sigh of relief. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was struggling to move forward, the huge dragon's claw swung the chain, and with a hong sound, the Azure Sky Great Demon King, who was unable to move freely, directly collapsed a mountain. The Azure Sky Great Demon King was immediately decapitated, and his head was separated from his corpse. Roar! Another dragon roar sounded, and the 2 dragon binding ropes in the giant dragon's claws lashed out in all directions like thunder, charging directly at Yu Qianqiu. Meanwhile, the Demon King of Qing Tian, who had fallen to the ground with his head separated from his body, suddenly stood up. The headless corpse waved its hand toward the distance, and the head immediately flew back. The head reattached to the neck, and the hands returned to normal. Damn it! The Demon King of Qing Tian let out a furious roar that sounded like a ferocious spirit. With a teleportation, the other 6 great Demon Kings who were overseeing this place also flashed over at the same time. The 7 great Demon Kings surrounded the extremely arrogant huge dragon, and gave it a violent beating, causing Hong Tailong to howl in pain. After all, The great demon king's cultivation was not to be trifled with. It was only because his dragon race's flesh and blood body was extremely strong. If it was someone else, they would have been killed long ago. However, he was also beaten to the point where his entire body was covered in blood. The situation was critical, and Yu Qianqiu could no longer hold back. He had already prepared the true Samadhi fire in Utopia for emergency use, and he summoned the infernal soldier that was condensed from the true Samadhi fire that he had prepared in Utopia in case of an emergency. The true Samadhi fire charged out of the encirclement of the 10,000 divine swords, and in an instant, the experts who were heavily encircled outside were beaten to a pulp. In the blink of an eye, several hundred experts fell to the ground while wailing in pain from the inextinguishable seven-colored flames. Once the infernal soldier broke free, it charged toward Hong Tailong to help him out. True Samadhi fire. Countless exclamations rang out in the illusory immortal city. The 7 demon kings who had joined hands were taken aback. Before they could react, one of them was smacked into a ball of fire by the infernal soldier, and he fell to the ground while spitting out fresh blood. The remaining 6 demon kings did not expect that the cultivation level of this infernal soldier would be so high, and he could instantly kill a great demon king with just a raise of his hand. They were instantly scared out of their wits, and they immediately teleported away without any hesitation. When Hong Tailong broke free and saw that he had the help of a great god infernal soldier, he immediately roared, "All of you die!" Shaking his head and wagging his tail, he chased after them. "Hong Tailong, come back here. Let's retreat." Yu Qianqiu shouted madly, and at the same time, he took out the last of his reserves without caring about the price. All the true Samadhi fire that he had stored in his body gushed out, and the surrounding people instantly let out countless wails of pain. After the true Samadhi fire exploded, it quickly retracted and attached itself to the 10,000 divine swords. Rainbow lights danced in the air, and they directly opened up a path of blood, charging towards the returning Hong Tailong. The 2 of them were preparing to rendezvous and leave this place. Seeing that the 2 of them wanted to escape, Eunuch Li, who was standing with his hands behind his back, let out a cold snort. He put down his hands behind his back, and his figure disappeared from the roof. Yan Juexing looked left and right, and instantly felt a little unsafe. Hong Tailong, who was hurriedly returning, suddenly realized that his neck had stiffened, and he stopped flying in the air. Yu Qianqiu cried out in alarm, "Hong Tailong, be careful!" A large illusory hand suddenly appeared in the sky, and with a speed as fast as lightning, it grabbed Hong Tailong's neck. With just a bit of force, Hong Tailong spurted out a mouthful of blood, and a large tongue dangled out like the tongue of a dog under the shade of a tree. His 2 large eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. If that giant hand wanted to kill Hong Tailong, it would be as easy as pinching an ant to death. Yu Qianqiu saw that person in white clothes and white hat high up in the sky. The giant hand was illusory from his body, and he immediately said in a stern voice, "Yi Tiankong's little life is in my hands. Try and kill him." The expressionless Eunuch Li's countenance changed when he heard that. He suddenly stared at Yu Qianqiu, and the giant hand grabbed Hong Tailong and smashed him. A red light shot towards the ground, and with a boom, the ground trembled. Hong Tailong's enormous body directly blasted a deep pit on the ground. Meanwhile, the Fire Soul Profound weapon had already pounced into the sky, and a fist was blasted out like a thunderbolt. The illusory giant hand on Eunuch Li's body clenched into a fist, and actually clashed with the incoming heavy fist. With a loud bang, the astral winds that rippled out were like millions of mountains that were pushed down in all directions. The entire psychedelic immortal city immediately suffered the baptism of an incomparably powerful shock wave. The visible wave of air that spread out was like breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. In an instant, countless mountains were flung away, houses and buildings were turned into ashes, and there were even innumerable figures that were instantly torn into pieces. Hong Tailong, who had transformed back into his human form, had just climbed out of the deep pit when he was struck by the powerful wave of air. He spat out blood and fell into the deep pit, and was almost buried alive. The quick-witted Yu Qianqiu instantly fused the 10,000 swords into one to form a steel ball to protect his body, and directly burrowed into the depths of the ground. However, he still felt the enormous pressure coming from the ground. He didn't dare to delay, as he was afraid that Hong Tailong's life would be in danger. He quickly broke through the ground and went into the deep pit. He grabbed Hong Tailong and was about to escape. "Wait! Your Fire Soul Profound Weapon!" Hong Tailong, who was on the verge of death, grabbed him and said. After the two experts collided in the sky, they rapidly separated. The true Samadhi fire that was condensed on the Fire Soul Profound Weapon had already been shaken to the point that a lot of it had already dispersed. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand, and the Fire Soul Profound Weapon repeatedly teleported over. In the night sky, Eunuch Li's eyes were as bright as day. His figure flashed, and his original body similarly teleported repeatedly as he rapidly chased after Hong Tailong. A huge hand appeared once again, and directly stretched out its claws to pierce towards the back of the Fire Soul Profound Weapon. When the Fire Soul Profound Weapon neared the deep pit, it flipped over and retaliated with a fist. Bang! Another earth-shattering bang resounded. After all, the Fire Soul Profound Weapon was a dead object that relied on energy to support itself. Without the support of sufficient true Samadhi fire, in addition to the fact that it had already suffered a heavy injury and consumed a huge amount of energy, how could it still persist? Bang! The majestic true Samadhi fire instantly exploded, and a purple bead shot into the deep pit like a meteor. After that, a huge claw directly blasted away the raging true Samadhi fire, and chased after the purple bead. Yu Qianqiu was greatly shocked. He waved his hand at the bead that was shooting over, and instantly disappeared with Hong Tailong. Boom! The ground trembled, and the claw that was stabbing down directly shook open the deep pit into an abyss that extended in all directions. Eunuch Li, who had shot down rapidly from the sky, immediately dove into the abyss. The ground trembled violently again, and huge chunks of soil that were hundreds of meters or even thousands of meters in radius continuously flew into the sky. The few great demon kings that were protecting Yan Zhuixing were shocked. Just now, Eunuch Li's attack had already implicated tens of thousands of their own people. How could they dare to stay any longer? They immediately protected Yan Zhuixing and quickly left again. Countless demon Dao experts were also scared out of their wits, as they quickly fled in all directions. In just a short while, the entire huge illusory immortal city had been dug out. All the mountains, land, and water were gone. All of them had flown into the sky, and a terrifyingly huge pit had appeared below. Even underground lava had begun to gush out. It was unimaginable how a person could dig out such a huge pit in such a short period of time. Countless chunks of soil from the sky didn't even have time to fall. Eunuch Li stood at the center of the huge pit with a gloomy expression. After scanning the surroundings, he flew into the sky, and the countless chunks of soil that covered the starry sky finally fell down with a rumble. In just a short while, the entire pit was filled up again. The ground trembled, and as the endless dust covered the sky, Eunuch Li had come out of the ground again. He floated in the sky and looked down silently. His expression was so gloomy that it seemed like water could be squeezed out of it. He didn't say anything for a long time. Ever since he had ascended as a demon god, he had never made a move easily. Once he did, he had never failed. However, he had failed today. He had let two people with lower cultivation than him slip away under his nose. Furthermore, they were two people with lower cultivation than him. Demon King 3 Knights, who had rushed back through the night, had heard the commotion here from far away. In a great shock, he had sped up and rushed back. He had encountered many of his subordinates that had scattered. When he arrived at the illusory immortal city, he discovered that the entire city had been destroyed. The entire landscape had changed, as if a divine plow had fallen from the sky and plowed through everything. Even with his vast experience and knowledge, he was secretly shocked. Seeing the silent Eunuch Li floating in the sky, he quickly went over and asked, "What happened?" Eunuch Li took a deep breath, and his gloomy expression returned to normal. He bowed slightly to Demon King 3 Knights and said, "Yu Qianqiu snuck into the illusory immortal city to assassinate the Vice Palace Lord in the middle of the night. This subordinate's attack wasn't good, and he still managed to escape." "What?" Demon King 3 Knights was shocked. "Even you let him escape?" Chapter 1188. At the same time, he quickly looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw a few demon kings protecting Yan Juexing. The demonic path army that had scattered in all directions also regrouped. All of them looked at Eunuch Li with lingering fear, frightened by his methods. At this moment, Jintai also hurried back and looked around in bewilderment. Eunuch Li quietly floated to Three Knights' side and said solemnly, "Let's not talk about this subordinate's incompetence for now." What shocked this subordinate the most was that there was a huge red dragon that came with Yu Qianqiu to assassinate him. Dragon? Demon King Three Knights suddenly turned around and said, "You mean a dragon from the god realm?" "A huge red dragon?" Jintai smacked his lips and suddenly exclaimed, "Could it be Hong Tai Long? Could it be that he's not dead?" Eunuch Li slowly looked at him and nodded slightly. "That's right. Yu Qianqiu called that huge red dragon Hong Tai Long." Demon King Three Knights also turned around and revealed a questioning look. Jintai hurriedly bowed and explained that Hong Tai Long was the mount of that demon lord of 10,000 swords. However, I personally saw him and demon lord of 10,000 swords fall into the soul-transforming smoke. I didn't expect him to still be alive. This subordinate is worried that demon lord of 10,000 swords is still alive. However, since the divine arrow is in Yu Qianqiu's hands, the chances of demon lord of 10,000 swords surviving are not high. Otherwise, he would definitely come for revenge. I didn't expect the God Realm's dragon race to also participate in this matter. Demon King Three Knights' eyes flickered. That dragon is not worthy of fear. This subordinate can easily kill him. Eunuch Li suddenly reported with a serious expression. Just as this subordinate was about to kill that dragon, Yu Qianqiu suddenly called out fourth young master's name. "What?" Demon King Three Knights' body trembled. He turned around and looked at Eunuch Li in disbelief. "What did you just say?" Jintai was stunned. He didn't know where this fourth young master came from. Back when he was in the demon realm, the demon lord only had 2 sons. This subordinate dares not speak nonsense. Eunuch Li bowed, looked at San Yi and slowly said, "Yu Qianqiu said that Yi Tiankong's life was in his hands. I don't know how he knew fourth young master's name, and I don't know if it's true or false, but it did make this subordinate hesitate to take action." Night Sky? Jintai thought about it carefully. He had no impression of this name at all. It should be the first time he had heard of it. Yu Qianqiu. Demon Lord Three Knights squeezed out these 3 words from between his teeth. He then flung his scarlet cape and said with a cold glint in his eyes, "I don't care if what he said is true or false. Immediately gather the army and make detailed preparations. This attack must be foolproof. We can't let him escape again. When this lord enters the Divine Ruins realm, I will capture him and personally interrogate him." Eunuch Li did not forget to remind him. "Demon Lord, you must not underestimate Yu Qianqiu. This person can actually summon a middle-stage great god fire man. And it is a fire man condensed from true samadhi fire, forcing me to not dare to go all out. He is not simple." "There is such a thing?" Demon Lord Three Knights stared at Jintai, as if he wanted to hear his explanation. Jintai hurriedly bowed and said, "This subordinate has never heard of any true samadhi fire man." As Yu Qianqiu's cultivation increased day by day, the territory of Utopia became wider and wider, and the sea had already appeared. On an isolated island in the depths of the sea, 2 figures fell to the ground, sprawled on the ground, panting. "Damn it! The demonic path is indeed full of experts. I thought that after Demon Lord Three Knights left, I would be able to deal with him, but who knew that an incomparably powerful guy would appear? Even my middle-stage Great God Fire Soul profound weapon couldn't stop him. Too terrifying." "Hong Tai Long." Yu Qianqiu got up, shook Hong Tai Long who was covered in blood, and said anxiously, "Are you all right?" "I won't die yet." Hong Tai Long sat up and said with a bitter smile, "That person is indeed powerful. If you didn't say Yi Tiankong's name at the crucial moment, I would have probably died in his hands. I'll send you to the Divine Ruin realm to recuperate. At least there will be someone to take care of you when you need it." Yu Qianqiu stood up. He was fine, but he was scared out of his wits. Hong Tai Long patted the blood and mud on his face. Hearing the hidden meaning in Yu Yang's words, he raised his head and asked, "What do you want to do?" I'll make a trip to the netherworld, and think of a way to find out who the Earth Spirit is. If I don't devour the Earth Spirit and refine more high-grade Earth Soul profound weapons, we won't have any hope of winning against the demonic path. Yu Qianqiu sighed. With a wave of his hand, the two of them disappeared. Returning to the Divine Ruin Realm, Wei Chuanqiu and the others were shocked to see Hong Tai-long heavily injured. Yu Qianqiu left Hong Tai-long for them to take care of, then slipped away to the netherworld. In the dark netherworld, he was like a lonely night walker, searching for the ray of light that could change the fate of the three realms, even though his own methods weren't bright. Outside the Divine Ruin Realm, in the depths of the endless granite mountain range, was the entrance to the Divine Ruin Realm from the Immortal Realm. Boom. Following a not too loud sound, the entrance, which was originally sealed, suddenly reopened. A dot of white light expanded and rotated in the cave. Outside the cave, the 3 million demonic army covered the sky and earth. Demon Lord 3 Knights flashed to the top of the mountain and looked down. Eunuch Li, who was beside him, waved his hand and the 3 million army moved, rushing into the passage like a heavenly river flowing backwards. Under Wen Rui's guidance, the army that entered the Divine Ruin Realm quickly dispersed towards the base of the human army, flanking the two sides. The demonic army held their breaths and concentrated, moving stealthily under the cover of the fog. The order that the various armies received was to completely surround the base of the human army. Before receiving the order to attack, no one was allowed to act on their own, alerting the enemy. When the remaining 100,000 troops, under the leadership of the Demon King Qing Tian, guarded the entrance to the Divine Ruin Realm, Demon Lord 3 Knights led Eunuch Li and the others into the Divine Ruin Realm. Due to Yu Qianqiu's momentary softness, a huge net was currently surrounding the human army, and a catastrophic disaster was approaching the human army from all directions. Fortunately, Zhang Peng used the transparent spider silk of the temple rainbow spiders 100 miles away from the base to set up a communication device in the misty mountain range. Once they received the report, the people hiding in the surroundings immediately became alert and quickly checked. When they saw the densely packed group of people quietly approaching the base, they were all shocked and quickly crushed their communication jade talismans. Some people didn't even have the time to report before they were discovered and died on the spot. A few screams sounded in the quiet fog. Yen Juexing, who was following behind Demon Lord 3 Knights, waved his devil blade and cut through the transparent spider web beside him. He gritted his teeth and said, "Demon Lord, it looks like we've been discovered." Demon Lord 3 Knights coldly snorted, passed down the order. "Everyone, advance at full speed. Attack." Eunuch Li immediately gave the order, and the armies that were quietly approaching the base from all directions no longer carefully concealed their tracks. They all whistled as they surrounded the base. Inside the base, Zhang Peng, who was standing in front of the sand table map, received the reports from all over. With just a glance at the sand table, he knew that the base had already been surrounded by a large group of people. He quickly rushed out, crushed his communication jade archive, and ordered the various armies to attack. At the same time he shouted, "Enemy attack!" Close to 10,000 heroes instantly surged out of the base. They were already fully equipped in extraterrestrial metal armor, as if they were ghosts that had crawled out of the ground. Zhang Peng was also dressed in battle armor. He stood on top of a hill, looked around and shouted, "Defend the base at all costs." "Yes." The 10,000 soldiers shouted, and quickly formed a defensive formation. The 11th Army's million men moved in full force according to their previous training, quickly entering the designated battle location. Before they could even catch their breaths, they were immediately assaulted by a torrential wave of attacks. They were attacked from all directions at the same time, and the battle reached its climax in the blink of an eye. In an instant, blood and flesh splattered everywhere. Rumble! The deafening sound shook the heavens and the earth. Almost everyone in the base came out in shock. Even Bai Suzhen and the injured Hong Tailong were no exception. The men and women who had surged out of the base were all asking what was going on. Zhang Peng had no idea what was going on, but he was afraid that something would happen to these people. He quickly shouted at the men and women, "All of you retreat." However, these arrogant men and women were all rubbing their palms together, thinking that they could be of help. Only Hong Tailong heard the commotion in the distance and knew that something was wrong. His expression changed and he said, "Not good. There are quite a few experts. Who can contact Yu Qianqiu? Quickly summon him back. We need to retreat." Zhang Ping knew that an expert like him would not speak without thinking, so he quickly took out his small silver ball. Hibiscus also took out her silver ball, and so did 100 Charms Enchantress. The million-strong army from the human world had only been training for less than a year, but they all thought that they were invincible with numbers. They were full of ambition and wanted to show off their skills. Little did they know that if they could really be invincible, Yu Qianqiu would have dragged them out to fight a long time ago. However, there were indeed some benefits to this. The first wave of arrogance was actually resisted by their frenzied attacks. However, when the demonic path experts opened up a path and tore them apart, deafening explosions and miserable screams rang out endlessly. The human army was simply unable to withstand a single blow. In addition, the difference in cultivation was too great, so they were immediately faced with an inhumane massacre. Just these little bastards want to block my demonic path army. Demon Lord 3 Knights looked down from the sky and snorted disdainfully. He sniffed the stench of blood and said coldly, "Have all the armies slowly advance. Surround them from both the sky and the ground. Don't let a single person escape today." With a wave of his cloak, he led Eunuch Li and the others to rapidly advance. In the face of enemies who were superior in both numbers and strength, and in the face of this asymmetrical battle, the morale of the millions of soldiers in the human world was instantly crushed. The survivors turned around and fled, not listening to any military orders or *T orders. Running for their lives was the most important thing. The demonic path army was not in a hurry to give chase. Instead, they formed a tight encirclement and slowly advanced. Chapter 1189. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyan, who were nearby, saw that defeat was inevitable. They couldn't stop the enemy's attack at all, and they couldn't stop the army from dispersing. They knew that everything was over. Amidst the fierce attack, the two of them looked at each other from afar and quickly escaped together. Suddenly, the two of them felt a chill on their waist and lost their sense of direction at the same time. Both of them fell from the sky, and saw the lower half of their bodies still spurting blood. The countenances of the two of them changed drastically. They crashed heavily into the ground and rolled on the ground, facing each other. Gu Qingyan coughed up blood as he looked at Hong Qi and smiled miserably. To think that we would have such an ending. Hong Qi also kept spurting out blood from his mouth. He said while gurgling, "Wrong choice." Gu Qingyan turned his head and looked at the densely packed and slowly advancing demonic army in the sky. Then he grabbed Hong Qi's hand strenuously and said with a weak breath, "What did you say?" Hong Qi tightened his grip on Chu Yang's hand. His eyes widened, but his pupils were gradually dilating. He panted and said, "Back then, Master asked Zhang Peng and me to choose between the metal incantation art or the earth incantation art. I chose the metal incantation art. If I had chosen the earth incantation art, today, we could have escaped from underground." After she said those words with great effort, her gaze became completely unfocused. It was unknown whether Gu Qingyan, whose eyes were wide open in a daze, heard what she said. In any case, the two of them held each other's hands tightly and stopped moving. The fog above the base was swept away by a strong air current. Demon King 3 Knights was in front. Yin Juexing and Eunuch Li were behind him on both sides. Behind them were Jintai, Hutu Hitorigami, and Moro, the 4 great Demon King level powerhouses, standing in a row. The 7 of them looked down coldly. Moro's 100,000 army directly plunged down from the sky and surrounded the entire valley, preventing the scattered army from entering. At the same time, it also prevented the people inside from escaping. The expressions of the men and women below changed drastically as they raised their heads to look at the sky. Hong Tailong realized that the white-robed man with a profound cultivation was still standing behind the mighty-looking man with the cloak on his shoulders. He immediately whispered, "This person should be the Demon King 3 Knights. We are not his match. Everyone retreat, quickly." Yin Juexing sneered in the sky. "Great. Those important to Yu Qianqiu are all here. Jin Tai's gaze suddenly looked down at Ji Wu and Immortal Crocodile Lord, not knowing why they were here. Finally, his gaze landed on Hong Tailong and found that it was indeed the Hong Tailong from back then. Seeing that these people were trying to escape into the underground base, the 3 Knights Demon Lord waved his hand, and the 4 Demon King level experts teleported down. They lined up in a row and blocked the entrance. The expressions of Hong Tailong and the others changed drastically. Hong Tailong and said coldly, "Who to you?" Demon King 3 Knight stared at the earth spirit below. "To you is you, Tailong Knight." Demon King Huta cupped his hands and stomped on the ground. The entrance behind him was instantly blocked by mud. Hong Tailong suddenly turned around and looked at Demon King Hutu with surprise and joy. He did not expect this person to be in Yu Qianqiu. Just as his gaze turned to Jin Tai, he heard Demon King 3 Knights snort. "Where is Yu Qianqiu?" Hibiscus and the other women's faces were filled with fear. No one below answered. Yin Juexing, who found a chance to vent, immediately shouted, "You dare not answer Demon King's question? You are courting death." The floating demon blade behind him shot down, and a golden chain flew out. Boom! Hong Tailong's dragon binding rope knocked the demon blade away. "You dare to show off with your puny cultivation." Hong Tailong swung the dragon binding rope in his hand and sneered. Yin Juexing made a fool of himself in front of everyone. His eyes were about to pop out of their sockets as he hurriedly recalled the demon blade that was knocked away. "Then let this lord see how high your cultivation is." Demon King 3 Knights waved his hand, and a torrential demon cloud surged out from behind his scarlet cape. A huge demon claw grabbed down from the sky. Hong Tailong's dragon binding rope quickly lashed out, but it was nimbly caught by the demon claw. With a light shake, the flesh on Hong Tailong's palm split open, and blood gushed out. He took a few steps back, and blood flowed out of his mouth. The dragon binding rope was instantly snatched away. "Kill!" Zhang Peng suddenly shouted, and close to 10,000 hero soldiers surged out from the valley. A group of warriors wearing heavenly metal armor fearlessly charged at Demon King 3 Knights, and the others in the sky. Close to 1,000 people charged at Jin Tai's group of 4. Immediately after, Zhang Peng took the opportunity to slap the ground, and the group of people quickly sank into the ground. They wanted to sacrifice close to 10,000 subordinates to fight for a chance to escape. However, the opponent's cultivation was too high, so high that it was beyond his imagination. A golden cloud rod suddenly appeared in Jin Tai's hand, and it became longer and larger, sweeping in all directions. The close to 1,000 people didn't even have the chance to get close. The other 3 great demon kings were calm and unruffled, as though they couldn't be bothered to make a move. However, seeing that they wanted to escape, Great Demon King Huta coldly snorted. "You dare to show off your earth elemental arts in front of me?" He raised his foot and stomped. Just as everyone sank halfway into the ground rapidly rebounded, and the group of people was pushed back. Zhang Peng's face instantly turned pale, and he thought to himself, "It's over." In the sky, the Demon Claw's dragon binding rope created a monstrous whip shadow. Clang clang. The figures that rushed up were all sent flying. The defense of the heavenly metal armor was indeed strong. Even Demon King 3 Knights couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. With his cultivation, he was actually unable to break through the sturdy armor. However, his cultivation was too high. As long as he hit, the heavenly metal armor would immediately crumble, and blood would spurt out from the gaps of the armor. The people inside had no chance of survival. Although the heroic army wasn't afraid of death, this wasn't a battlefield that belonged to their level. The difference was like heaven and earth, and they would only be sending themselves to their deaths. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu, who was in the underworld, suddenly heard the urgent calls of so many people. He immediately knew that something had happened, but he didn't know what had happened. He hurriedly rushed back to the base, and when he quickly reached the exit of the base, he found that the exit was sealed. Just as he was about to break through the ground, he suddenly heard Yin Juexing's fierce shout coming from outside. Coupled with the sounds of battle that hadn't subsided yet, his expression immediately changed. Without hesitation, he quickly returned to the depths of the base and broke into the secret cave, whereby Hua Fairy and Yin Zixia were imprisoned. As soon as he saw him rushing in with a murderous aura, Ferdinand was shocked and blocked the mother and daughter, saying, "You Qianqiu, everything can be discussed, they didn't do anything wrong to you. Get lost." Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily. With a wave of his hand, he directly sent Ferdinand back to Utopia. The mother and daughter tried to block and protect each other in fear, but Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything and sent 2 balls of Samadhi true fire into the mother and daughter's bodies, knocking them out. Then he grabbed them and broke through the soil layer above to rush out of the ground. "Stop. All of you, stand down." Yu Qianqiu's fierce shout came from afar, and everyone looked over. In the blink of an eye, there were only about 1,000 people left in the heroic army. When they saw that it was him who gave the order, they quickly dodged and surrounded Zhang Peng and the others to protect them. Yu Qianqiu carried the mother and daughter and flew over, but he was blocked by the Mara army. Yu Qianqiu lifted the mother and daughter up to show everyone with a gloomy expression. Yan Zhuixing exclaimed, "Mother, sister." Be it eunuch Li Jintai and the other great demon kings, they all looked at each other. Demon Lord 3 Knights retracted the demonic claw that he had condensed and held the dragon-taming rope in his hand. He shouted coldly, "Let him come over." The Mara army quickly opened up a path and quickly intercepted and killed the people who came over. God knew how many people cried out to him for help. "Disciplinary envoy, save me." Yu Qianqiu carried the 2 of them and flew to the sky above the base. He looked around, and everywhere he looked, there were corpses strewn all over. Under such a blatant massacre, many people cried out to him for help when they saw him, but he couldn't do anything. This made his heart feel like it was being cut by a knife, but he knew that now wasn't the time to be impulsive. He had to stay calm, or else he might not be able to save anyone. Furthermore, he couldn't bring so many people away at once. "Yan Zhuixing, your mother and sister are in my hands. Hurry up and tell your subordinates to stop." Yu Qianqiu shouted with a sinister expression. He carried the mother and daughter and slowly landed in front of everyone. 10,000 golden flying swords flew out from his sleeves and danced in the sky, protecting everyone behind him. The fire soul mystic weapon condensed by the true Samadhi fire also appeared out of nowhere and protected him. Hong Tailong and the others saw that Yu Qianqiu had actually captured Yan Zhuixing's mother and sister as hostages, and they all heaved a sigh of relief. Yan Zhuixing immediately shouted angrily with his eyes wide open, "Yu Qianqiu, you despicable person! Tell your subordinates to stop and let my people come over. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite to your mother and sister." Yu Qianqiu said word by word. Now that things had come to this, he still wanted to save as many people as possible. Who knew that the moment these words came out, Demon King 3 Knights was very unhappy. How could he always be threatened by others? The 2 dragon-binding ropes in his hands suddenly shot out, and directly stabbed towards the Allure Beauty and Jasper Flower Fairy below. He also wanted to capture the 2 of them to threaten Yu Qianqiu. Otherwise, he would be at a disadvantage even though he had won a great victory. The dragon-binding ropes were as fast as lightning, catching everyone off guard. Fortunately, the Fire Soul Mystic weapon suddenly shot out and grabbed onto the 2 dragon-binding ropes. 2 streams of true Samadhi fire quickly burned along the dragon-binding ropes. Demon King 3 Knights hurriedly released his grip. His eyes glowed red as demonic aura swirled around his body. He was truly enraged. He pointed down and shouted, "If you dare touch a single strand of hair on the mother and daughter, I guarantee that none of you will live." The white-robed and white-hat eunuch Li also took a step forward. Yu Qianqiu was alarmed. He knew that he could not hesitate any longer. His divine sense enveloped everyone behind him, and they disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. Such an inconceivable scene stunned everyone. They could not imagine how these people had suddenly disappeared. Eunuch Li teleported below and slowly walked to investigate the situation. Demon King 3 Knights, who had just boasted, was stunned in the air. He never expected that he would slap himself in the face. Suddenly, his demonic aura surged into the sky. He raised his arms high and roared, "Kill! Kill them all! Leave no one alive!" In an instant, the demonic army began a frenzied massacre. The screams in the surroundings gradually weakened at this moment. Yu Qianqiu could not care less about exposing the secret of Utopia to too many people. He knew what would happen to the remaining people after he escaped with these people. Once everyone landed in Utopia, Yu Qianqiu quickly scanned the familiar faces. Suddenly his face turned pale as he exclaimed, "Hong Qi, Gu Qingyuan, Zhang Peng, they aren't with you?" Chapter 1190. When Zhang Peng heard this, his expression changed and he said in panic, "Senior brother and the others are commanding the army to resist. They are still in the Divine Ruin realm." Everyone's hearts thumped as they looked at Yu Qianqiu. Judging from the situation at that time, it was likely that his disciple had already met with a mishap. Nongzhu, who was quarreling with the Jade Flower Fairy and her daughter, no longer had the intention to settle the score with Yu Qianqiu. She looked at him with a serious expression. As for Furong and the other women, they couldn't bear to look at him. They finally understood why Yu Qianqiu didn't want them to go out and take risks. The strength of the Devil Path was beyond their imagination. It was not something they could afford to play with. This time, the entire army had been annihilated. The losses were too great. Everyone was even worried that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't be able to take this blow. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes and sensed. Hong Qi and Gu Qingyuan both had the small silver ball he had given them, so he quickly found their location. Sure enough, they were still in the Divine Ruin realm. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He slowly opened his eyes and looked at the crowd, saying, "Zhang Peng, you are familiar with this place. Arrange for everyone. I will go and save the people from the Great Flaming Mountain, and your senior brother." With a wave of his hand, he took away the Fire Soul Profound weapon. Yu Qianqiu. Hong Tailong, who had yet to recover from his injuries, shouted. He originally wanted Yu Qianqiu to bring him along to help, but unfortunately, Yu Qianqiu had already left. Everyone was speechless. This incident had given them too much of a shock. Those who were close to Yu Qianqiu and knew of Yu Qianqiu's temper could not imagine what Yu Qianqiu would do within the Divine Ruins realm. Yu Qianqiu found Hong Qi and Gu Qingyuan, but they were two corpses that had been cut in half at the waist. The air was still filled with the thick smell of blood. But the sounds of fierce fighting had already come to a stop. The demonic path army had already pushed through this area, so there was no need to worry about being discovered. The thin fog that was filled with the smell of blood was blown by the wind. The Fire Soul Mystic weapon stood quietly behind him to protect him. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two broken corpses silently. The two corpses' hands were still tightly clasped together. His gloomy face twitched violently. He suddenly flashed and searched around. After a while, he found the lower bodies of the two people and put them together before sending them back to Utopia. After seeing the corpses of Hong Qi and Gu Qingyuan, and then looking at Yu Qianqiu's murderous gaze, they did not know what to say. They could not even say words of condolence. Yu Qianqiu didn't stay for long and left. When he returned, he brought old ancestor Nanming, Ape King, and the others from Great Flame Mountain with him. Everyone thought that the matter had come to an end for the time being. In order to comfort him, Hong Tailong also said, Yu Qianqiu, I already know who the Earth Spirit is. So it's the Great Demon King Ho-Tu under Demon King 3 Nights. The day of our revenge is not far away. Yu Qianqiu nodded, looked at Zhang Peng and asked, I want to know why this happened. How did they know that we were hiding in the Divine Ruins realm? Zhang Peng hesitated for a moment, then said with some difficulty, Nothing happened before, but ever since when Rue went out, I'm afraid it has something to do with him. I understand. It seems that I was too soft-hearted. Yu Qianqiu nodded again. Without saying anything else, he turned and walked towards Bai Hua Fairy and Yin Zixia, who were still unconscious on the ground. He grabbed the two of them and disappeared again. Everyone was shocked. What did he mean by taking the mother and daughter away? Could it be that he wanted to find Yan Zhuixing and the others? At the place where Hong Qi and Gu Qingyuan died, the mother and daughter who had just woken up looked at the ashen-faced Yu Qianqiu in horror. The two of them couldn't move or speak. Yu Qianqiu reached his hand behind him. The Fire Soul Xian soldier behind him handed over a large machete condensed from Samadhi True Fire. Yu Qianqiu took the machete and stabbed it into the ground. He then patted the two of them on the shoulder and slowly pushed them away. He then slowly walked between the mother and daughter to the front, and turned around to look at them with an ashen face. Millions of cultivators in the human realm were slaughtered by Yan Zhuixing and the others. I watched them die without being able to do anything. I overestimated myself and harmed them. The two of you are the most innocent people. It is also I, Yu Qianqiu, who has wronged you. Today will be the day that I, Yu Qianqiu, will never be able to rest in peace for the rest of my life. Yan Zhuixing has the protection of a demon god. I may not be able to kill him, but I will make him unable to eat or sleep in peace for the rest of his life. I will make him unable to escape from his nightmares. I will make him cry every day in his dreams. I want to see if he still has the face to become the next demon king of the demon realm. As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Qianqiu's hands reached for the collars of the mother and daughter. Under the horrified eyes of the two, he grabbed their collars and tore them apart. Shwa shwa sounds rang out, and the torn clothes fluttered in the air. Two curvaceous and alluring naked bodies appeared in the wind that was filled with the smell of blood. Crystal tears rolled down from the eyes of the two. Yu Qianqiu turned a blind eye to them. When he brushed past them with a livid expression, he said indifferently, "If there is a next life, I, Yu Qianqiu, am willing to do anything for you as an apology." He turned around and pulled out the colorful machete, carrying it on his shoulder. He faced the direction of the base and waited silently. The demonic path's army barged into the underground base and searched everywhere. It was empty, but they did not find a single person. After receiving the report, Demon King Three Knights muttered, "Where can they hide with so many people?" Yan Zhuixing cupped his hands and said, "Demon King, right now Yu Qianqiu only has one place to go, and that is the human realm. As long as we find a way to open that passage, and with the three realms under our control, they will have nowhere to run." "Not good," Uniquely suddenly said in surprise. "Since Yu Qianqiu has a way to seal the human realm's passage, then he has a way to seal the divine ruins realm, the Demon King. We can't stay here for long." Demon King Three Knights was also shocked. He decisively shouted, "Go!" He turned into a stream of light and flew away. Everyone followed closely behind. No one wanted to be sealed again. Not long after they moved, a colorful light suddenly shot into the sky in front of them. Demon King Three Knights and Uniquely, who were traveling side by side, suddenly stopped. They waved their hands to disperse the mist below. When they looked down, their pupils suddenly shrank. They stared down in horror. Even though the two of them were experienced and knowledgeable, they were still shocked by this scene. Although it was not bloody and was very erotic, to them, it was more vicious than anything else. Yan Zhuixing, who had rushed over, took a look. His eyes widened as he spat out a mouthful of blood. He howled in grief, "Yu Qianqiu." Without any bargaining, Yu Qianqiu did not say a word. He raised his blade and beheaded the mother and daughter, then disappeared together with the Fire Soul profound weapon. When the demonic cultivators saw this scene, all of them were dumbfounded. Seeing his mother and sister die in such a humiliating manner in front of everyone, Yan Zhuixing pointed a trembling finger at the two people who had fallen to the ground. He spat out another mouthful of blood and clenched his chest. With a cry of pain, his vision went black and he fainted on the spot. Demon King Three Knights pulled him back and hugged him. He shouted to Uniquely, "Quickly go and guard the entrance to the Divine Ruins realm. I'll take care of this." Uniquely flew away without hesitation. In Utopia, everyone saw that Yu Qianqiu had returned alone, while Bai Hua Fairy and her daughter were gone. They wanted to say something, but when they saw his ashen face, they did not ask. "Zhang Peng, help me bury your senior brother and the others. I'm tired." Yu Qianqiu looked around at everyone and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. He said, "Victory and defeat are common in war. We still have a chance to make a comeback. Everyone has been frightened. Go and rest." After saying that, he flew towards Misty Palace. However, his body seemed abnormally heavy. Not only was his speed extremely slow, his body was even swaying in the air. Those who were close to him were shocked, especially the girls. They couldn't wait to support him and ask him what was wrong. However, 100 Charm Beauty stopped them and said in a low voice, "He's suffered too much. Let him vent it out himself." Otherwise, he'll be depressed and something bad will happen. Everyone felt that she was right, so they slowly followed behind him and flew to Ethereal Palace. Chu Ping'er and the others of Misty Palace also knew that he had returned. They were about to go and welcome him, but as soon as they left the palace, they saw a large group of people flying towards them. Chu Ping'er hadn't seen Yu Qianqiu for many years. She was originally resentful, but when she saw Yu Qianqiu's extremely exhausted appearance, his body on the verge of collapse and his face wearing a guilt-ridden smile, her resentment turned into heartache. She hurriedly went over to support him. "What's wrong?" "I'm fine. I just missed you." Yu Qianqiu buried his head in her ear and whispered, "I feel very sorry for you. It's all my fault. You won't blame me, right?" He wasn't afraid of having too many women around him getting jealous. How could he say such mushy words in front of everyone? Chu Ping'er, whose grievances had turned into tears, was about to complain. Suddenly, she sensed a dying aura from Yu Qianqiu. She immediately turned pale with fright and asked, "What's wrong with you?" She didn't get an answer. She looked at the crowd and asked anxiously, "What's wrong with him?" Everyone sighed. Bai Suzhen walked to her side and shook her head, signaling her not to ask anymore. The two of them supported Yu Qianqiu and walked into the palace. Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly, a woman's sharp and angry voice came from afar. Everyone turned to look and saw three figures rushing over. One was Xiao Wanqing, whose face was full of anger. One of her hands was holding onto the unshaven Chen Feng, who was holding onto a wine pot. The other hand was holding onto her son, who was already a grown man. Her son looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of hatred. Another figure flew over. Guan Yu smiled bitterly and stopped the three of them, persuading them to go back. The three of them who had already climbed up the stairs turned around. When Yu Qianqiu saw them, his ashen face squeezed out a smile and said, "What's going on? Xiao Wanqing, who offended your family?" Chen Feng hugged the wine pot and lowered his head in silence. Xiao Wanqing pointed at him and shouted angrily, "It's you! How long do you want to keep our family captive for? Do you want to treat our family as slaves who will sell our lives to you forever?" Yu Qianqiu. Her son also took a step forward and pointed at Yu Qianqiu's nose and shouted angrily, "To think that my father still treats you as a brother. But what do you think we are? I know that you are a vicious and merciless person, but our family is not afraid of death. Make things clear today. Either you let us go, or you kill our entire family in front of everyone." Everyone's expression changed. They did not know what was going on. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a while. Then he looked at his family and sighed, "I don't blame you. It's all my fault. It's all my fault." Ugh. Before he could finish, his chest suddenly rose and fell rapidly. He spat out a mouthful of blood in front of everyone. His eyes closed and his body fell backward. Chapter 1191. Yu Qianqiu. A wave of exclamations rang out from all directions. Fortunately, Bai Suzhen and Chu Ping'er were supporting Yu Qianqiu, who had collapsed. Everyone instantly surrounded Yu Qianqiu, who had fainted from vomiting blood. In an instant, chaos ensued. Everyone anxiously asked him what was wrong and if he was injured. The unshaven Chen Feng suddenly raised his head, his face filled with sorrow and helplessness. Xiao Wanqing and her son looked at each other in shock. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so easily scolded to the point of vomiting blood and fainting. Things seemed to have really gotten out of hand. The two of them instantly panicked. They originally thought that by dragging Chen Feng along, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't dare to do anything to them in public. However, if they were to really be struck by lightning, it would be strange for the mother and son not to be afraid. Hong Tailong was also extremely anxious. Yu Qianqiu's mission of punishing on behalf of the heavens had yet to be completed. If something happened to Yu Qianqiu, he really wouldn't be able to report back. In a panic, he squeezed into the group of women and grabbed Yu Qianqiu to quickly examine him. "How are they?" The group of people looked at this expert anxiously. "They aren't injured." Hong Tailong shook his head. However, his expression was somewhat grave as he said, "However, they have nowhere to vent their grief and indignation, so they fell ill from depression. This is even more troublesome. Mental illness is incurable, And cultivators are most afraid of this. If they can't walk out from their mental demons and fall into oblivion, they will be no different from the living dead. Sigh. How bitter is this mental illness? How did it end up like this? In the next moment, everyone's gazes turned to the family of three. Many people's eyes were almost spitting fire, as if they wanted to skin the three of them alive. Chunfeng's head slowly pressed down again. Xiao Wanqing and her son couldn't hide the fear in their eyes. At this moment, Chu Ping suddenly squeezed out of the crowd. With tears in her eyes, she said in grief and indignation, "What are you guys trying to do? I've already promised him that I'll help you talk to him and beg him to let you out. Why don't you give him any face at all?" Xiao Wanqing's imposing manner weakened a little as she said, "How many times have you promised him? It's been so many years, and there has been no news from you. Other than saying that he hasn't come back, you're just saying that he hasn't come back. He comes and goes without a trace. How do we know if he really hasn't come back, or if he has come back and you didn't tell us, or if he didn't agree? Now that we know he's back, we naturally have to seek justice from him." Justice? Wei Chuanqiu stared at the three of them with a cold glint in his eyes. He raised his hand and twirled the mouse-like beard at the corner of his mouth and said with a chuckle, "You've stepped into the threshold of cultivation. It's either you die or I die, yet you still want to seek justice? I might as well." He slowly walked over and said, "I might as well give you justice and end all troubles once and for all." His killing intent had been aroused. Guan Yu hurriedly stood between them and cupped his hands in front of his chest. "Everyone, let's talk things out. There's no need to be so hostile. Stop arguing." Bai Suzhen's faint sigh rang out. She separated the crowd and walked out. She looked at the family of three coldly and said, "I've helped Yu Qianqiu make the decision today. Don't you just want to leave? Yu Qianqiu can come and go as he pleases in the human world, the immortal realm, and the underworld. You can go anywhere you want. When his body recovers, I'll persuade him to send you away." Some people looked at Bai Suzhen in confusion, while others looked pensive. Those who knew the inside knew that the immortal realm and the underworld were now the rulers of the demonic path. 71 of the 72 worlds in the human world were controlled by the demonic path. It was estimated that the demonic path would not allow cultivators to go to the sealed world. With the cultivation of this family, they wouldn't even be qualified to be a snack for the demonic path. Bai Suzhen hated this family of three to the bone. She wanted them dead. But she didn't want Yu Qianqiu to have any burden in his heart, so she let them decide their own fate. Chun Feng remained silent and did not say anything. The mother and son, on the other hand, whispered to each other and discussed. They first excluded the underworld where the dead lived, but in their understanding, they felt that the immortal world was naturally better than the human world. The peaceful scene of celestial flowers, celestial grasses, and immortals roaming the world of longevity was the dream of many cultivators in the human world. After coming to a conclusion, Xiao Wanqing clenched her teeth and said, "Bai Suzhen, this is what you promised. We didn't force you." Everyone heard it with their own ears. "I hope you won't go back on your words. Our family of three wants to go to the immortal realm." As soon as she said this, everyone sighed in their hearts. Now that the three realms were in chaos, killing was everywhere, and countless people had died. It was so good to live a peaceful life here, but they just had to go to the immortal realm where the demonic path ruled. Wasn't this courting death? "I naturally won't go back on my words. I believe that Yu Qianqiu will still give me this little bit of face. As you wish, after Yu Qianqiu recovers, I'll get him to send you to the immortal realm." After Bai Suzhen finished speaking, she resolutely turned around with a cold expression and got everyone to help carry Yu Qianqiu in. And Xiao Wanqing's family of three left with their tails between their legs. Everyone crowded around Yu Qianqiu and carried him into the room of the Misty Palace. When they placed him on the bed, they discovered that his face was deathly pale, but his cheeks had an intoxicating redness, which was extremely abnormal. It was a sign of his corporeal body's final radiance. Hong Tailong sucked in a breath of cold air and said angrily, "What is this guy trying to do? Is he trying to end his own life? Hurry up and help him circulate his body's functions." This guy is seeking death to end all his troubles. Everyone was taken aback and fought to lend a hand. Hong Tailong immediately roared. So many of you attacking randomly. Do you want to cripple his physical body? Everyone take turns. He already has the intention to seek death and is unwilling to circulate his body normally. Anyway, everyone take turns. Don't let his body stop circulating normally. Everyone was submissive, and the few ladies were so anxious that they started crying. In the end, the 100 Charms beauty was the first to benefit from the situation. She supported the unconscious Yu Qianqiu and circulated her energy to circulate his body normally. ****. Hong Tailong paced back and forth in the room, cursing incessantly. What did this two-faced, vicious, and merciless fellow do? Quite a number of people have died. Everyone can understand the sadness in his heart. After all, none of us feel good about it. But with this guy's thick skin, he shouldn't be unable to take the blow of failure, right? If that's really the case, this old dragon really can't imagine how he managed to survive until now. What did this guy do, or what did he encounter? Right at this moment, the room suddenly fell silent. Everyone's gazes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. They heard him mumbling, and everyone immediately focused their attention to listen. Unfortunately, the words were too vague, and they couldn't hear them clearly. Suddenly, a mumble that sounded like laughter was heard clearly. Zixia, your butt is so bouncy. Let me have a taste of those 2 lumps on your chest. The room instantly became so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard. The group of women who were choking with sobs stopped crying. Everyone looked at each other, thinking that they had heard wrongly. However, from everyone's expressions, they could tell that they hadn't heard wrongly. Finally, everyone looked at Hong Tailong suspiciously, doubting his words. A person who could say such words while unconscious, would he have the intention to seek death? Hong Tailong was even more dumbfounded. Yen Yu, who was sitting on the bed, suddenly smiled through her tears and said, "This dead man really doesn't change his lust. He's already like this, but he's still thinking about those messy things even in his dreams." Suddenly, everyone exclaimed in unison, "Not good." Although Yu Qianqiu's face was still smiling lasciviously, tears were flowing out from the corners of his tightly shut eyes. This wasn't considered much, but the tears gradually turned red, and in the end, blood flowed out directly. It was as if he was weeping for blood. Everyone panicked. They didn't know why he was so sad, but they had clearly heard his obscene words just now, and the lascivious smile on his face was still there. Hong Tailong quickly went over to examine him. After a long time, he slowly let out a breath and said, "There's nothing wrong with his body. It's good that you've cried it out. It's good that you've cried it out. It's good that you've vented it out." As he said that, he continued to say to the Allure Beauty, "Continue to help him maintain the normal circulation of his body. Don't stop. This scoundrel is sick in the head. He might not want to live again later." When everyone heard that it was a good thing, they more or less heaved a sigh of relief. However, they saw him suddenly turn around and ask, "Who is Zixia?" Hibiscus wiped away her tears, bowed and replied, "It's that pair of mother and daughter that he captured just now. They're also Yan Juixing's younger sister, Yan Zixia. He met Yan Zixia not long after he stepped into the cultivation world. The two of them seemed to have a relationship when they were on supporting Immortal Island. Later on, for some unknown reason, maybe it was because of Yan Juixing, the two of them didn't interact anymore." Hong Tailong made a no sound, looked at Yu Qianqiu, nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "I think I understand. This guy might have killed that pair of mother and daughter with his own hands. But if you can injure yourself to this extent, why would you do it?" Everyone was silent. They all thought that Yu Qianqiu was heartbroken because he had killed his old lover with his own hands. However, they didn't know how Yu Qianqiu killed them, or how he injured others and himself. The hallucinatory Immortal City was destroyed, and Wan Gutong's Myriad Saint Mountain was temporarily taken over by Demon Lord 3 Knights as a temporary base. In the main room of Myriad Saint Palace's backyard, Demon Lord 3 Knights stood with his hands behind his back, and Eunuch Li was by his side. The two of them frowned as they looked at Yan Juixing, who was unconscious on the bed. The Clear Sky Great Demon King was sitting by the bed, taking care of him. "Mother, sister, Yu Qianqiu, I'm going to kill you. Yan Zhuixing repeatedly said these words in his nightmare. The expression on his face was either crying or gritting his teeth. Even though he was extremely excited, he remained unconscious this entire time. Even Demon Monarch 3 knights and Eunuch Li were helpless against him. Suddenly Yan Zhuixing's body straightened. The clear sky Great Demon King moved as fast as lightning, and a handkerchief appeared by his mouth. Another mouthful of blood sprayed out. The clear sky Great Demon King showed the bloodied handkerchief to the two of them, then shook his head helplessly and threw it to the side. This Yu Qianqiu is too ruthless. He kills without leaving a trace. Demon Lord 3 knights looked at Yan Zhuixing and sighed. No one can accept such a thing happening in front of so many people. AI. As long as Yu Qianqiu doesn't die, Yan Zhuixing won't be able to face anyone. What's more, he's the Vice Palace Lord of our Demon Palace, and it happened right under our noses. It's a huge blow to the prestige of us and the entire Demon Dao. It's not a solution for him to continue like this. Eunuch Li's expression was solemn. It's already been 10 days. No matter how high his cultivation is, he can't keep vomiting blood like this. We have to think of a way to resolve his heart demon and wake him up. Chapter 1192. It's not like I don't want him to wake up as soon as possible. If something happens to him, how am I going to answer to Lord Demonic God of the Deity Realm? Demon Lord 3 knights let out a long sigh, turned around, and slowly walked out. When he reached the empty Myriad Sacred Palace, he suddenly looked at Floating Cloud and Grey Dog outside the door and said, "The Blue Sea Essence can cleanse the physical body and mind. It should be able to wake him up. It seems like this is the only way." Eunuch Li, who was following behind him, frowned and said, "Even if we find the Blue Sea Essence, he is still unconscious. He can't resist the corrosion of the Blue Sea Essence on his mind. Can he withstand it? What if he loses his mind? You must know that Lord Demonic God also lost his mind, because he couldn't resist it. He lost his mind and killed his wife, unable to differentiate between friend and foe. This was also because Lord Demonic God's mind was strong enough to forcefully reverse the situation. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. I also don't want to take this risk, but we can't just watch and do nothing, right?" Demon Lord 3 knights turned back to look at him, then looked into the distance and said in a deep voice, "The reason why Lord Demonic God chose him must be because his mind is strong enough to withstand the torture of the 7-star acupoint piercing art. With this strong will, I think he might be able to withstand it. Vice Palace Lord, it's not a solution to continue dragging this out. Since Demon Lord has made his decision, I'll make the arrangements now." After Eunuch Li obtained the decree, he quickly made preparations to head to the Blue Sea Death Trap. In Utopia's Misty Palace, Yu Qianqiu had also been unconscious for more than 10 days. A few women took turns to watch over him, and they were all a little anxious. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu's mind was filled with the ambiguous scenes of him and Yan Zixia on Fuxian Island. The two of them lived a blissful life in the Mulberry Garden, and lived a world of their own until they grew old. There were no grudges or disturbances. None of the people he knew before or after appeared in his dream. Even Hibiscus, who should have appeared in the Mulberry Garden, did not exist, let alone Yan Zhuixing. There seemed to be no messy people in his memory. While the two of them were strolling by the seaside, the romantic sea in front of them suddenly became turbulent. In the blink of an eye, the wind and clouds changed abruptly. The entire sea suddenly turned blood red. It had already become a vast sea of blood. Yan Zixia, who was holding his arm, suddenly turned into an incomparably ferocious blood snake. She tightly coiled around him, trying to drill into his 7 orifices. Yu Qianqiu turned pale with fright. He felt that this scene was very familiar. All of a sudden, a boundless golden light rose from the sea of blood. Wherever the golden light shone, the blood snake turned into smoke that wailed mournfully. The endless sea of blood dissipated. The last golden light shone directly on his glabella. Yu Qianqiu instantly woke up from his slumber. He recalled the scene where he was struck by Yan Zhuixing's demonic eye. B*****. Yu Qianqiu bellowed angrily. He opened his eyes abruptly and sat up from the bed. As he looked around furiously, he saw many familiar faces looking at him in panic. They seemed to be extremely anxious and afraid. Hong Tailong and the rest, who were helpless outside, suddenly heard Yu Qianqiu's loud voice. They immediately returned and swarmed into the room. What am I doing? Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he saw everyone. He recalled the cause and effect of the matter. Suddenly, he raised his hand and slapped his forehead. He smiled bitterly and said, I had such a long dream. What are you all doing here? As he said that, he jumped off the bed. Hong Tailong came over with a face full of suspicion. He observed carefully and asked, Are you really all right? *CK your crow's beak. What could possibly happen to this daddy? Yu Qianqiu spat. When everyone heard him curse again, they immediately felt relieved. They confirmed that he was really all right. Hong Tailong circled around him and sized him up. He clicked his tongue and said, Brat, you vomited blood and fainted. You slept for almost half a month. You made us worried to death. Previously you were half dead. Who would have thought that you would be alive and kicking in the blink of an eye? Looks like we were worried for nothing. I slept for half a month? Yu Qianqiu moved his slightly stiff body and said in astonishment. Seeing everyone staring at him and nodding in agreement, he fell silent and thought about what had happened. After a long while, he smiled bitterly and shook his head with a pensive expression. He said, I was so angry. I can't bear to look back on it. Everyone had roughly guessed what he had done. They were afraid that he would take things too hard, so they advised him to let bygones be bygones and not take it to heart. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but miss those who had passed away even more as he listened to the assortment of comforting voices and looked at the concerned faces around him. Then he recalled that Xiao Wanqing's family had come to make a scene before he fainted. He hurriedly asked Chu Ping'er how the matter had been handled. Chu Ping'er looked at Bai Suzhen, and Bai Suzhen immediately told her about her reply to their family. Yu Qianqiu fell silent for a moment before slowly saying, Gather all the cultivators in Utopia to the military camp. I'll talk to them. Chu Ping'er immediately made the arrangements. Not long after, all the cultivators in Utopia gathered in the spacious military drill ground. About 90% of the hero army had been lost, and there were only about 1,000 people left. Now there were more women than men in Utopia. The crowd below the stage watched as Yu Qianqiu slowly ascended the stage by himself. Standing firmly in the center of the stage, Yu Qianqiu scanned the crowd below. His gaze fell on Xiao Wanqing's family of 3 in the front row. It's understandable that some people want to leave Utopia and regain their freedom. I won't force them. A forceful melon won't be sweet, and it might even cause a rift. I can send you out, but on account of our past friendship, there are some things I have to make clear, lest it's too late for you to regret it. Yu Qianqiu's gaze slowly shifted away from the family of 3. He looked at everyone and continued. Perhaps everyone doesn't know the situation outside. Now that the 3 realms are in chaos and the demonic path is rampant, countless people have died under the demonic claws. There's something I have to admit. Before I returned, because of my mistake, millions of cultivators in the human world died. You can't imagine how arrogant the demonic flames are. Therefore, I advise everyone that Utopia is the safest place. There's no need for everyone to take the risk. Furthermore, I can guarantee that from today onwards, everyone can live freely in Utopia. I will definitely not use anything to interfere with everyone. Of course, if anyone has any trouble, you can look for Ethereal Palace to resolve it. Ethereal Palace will not ignore it. What do you think? Everyone did not expect their leader to say such a thing. They looked at each other. Xiao Wanqing suddenly took a step forward and said aggressively, From what you said, could it be that you want to persuade us to stay? That's indeed what I mean. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, I really don't want to see the people in Utopia suffer any more losses. I hope you can understand my painstaking efforts. If you don't believe me, you can ask the heroic team members who survived. They have personally experienced what happened outside. Yu Qianqiu, Xiao Wanqing's son shouted. He called out Yu Qianqiu's name and stood up. He angrily pointed at the few remaining members of the Hero Legion and angrily said, They are all your people. and they know that you are vicious and merciless. Didn't they say whatever you said and speak up for you? If you don't want to let us out, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush? It's beneath your status, and you'll become a laughingstock. This fellow had heard and witnessed his mother's curse at Yu Qianqiu since he was young. As time passed, he had almost treated Yu Qianqiu as an irreconcilable enemy. He had no choice but to win against Yu Qianqiu. Otherwise, it would be strange if he did not cut Yu Qianqiu into pieces. The moment he said that, Bai Suzhen and the rest wore hostile expressions. Even Hong Tailong and the others who had come to Utopia for the first time could not stand this kid. It was one thing for him to say such words if he had the ability, but he was so stubborn even though he did not have the ability. Wasn't he courting death? Yu Qianqiu glared at Chen Feng with a cold light in his eyes. So many people had died, and he was still angry. However, when he saw Chen Feng's dispirited expression, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said with a cold smile, "Brat! The number of people I've killed is more than the number of people you've met in your entire life combined. If I want to kill you, I can do it with a flick of my finger. It's even easier than stepping on an ant. Today, on account of your father, I won't hold it against a junior like you." Hearing Yu Qianqiu threaten her son, Xiao Wanqing roared hysterically, "Bai Suzhen, you promised to let us go to the celestial world. Why didn't you keep your word?" Hong Tailong and the group of people who had experienced life and death outside shook their heads when they heard this. Bai Suzhen was just about to reply when Yu Qianqiu pressed his hand down, indicating that he should handle it. "Chen Feng, I'll only ask you one question." Yu Qianqiu stared at Chen Feng and said in a deep voice, "If you say leave, I'll let your family go. If you say stay, I'll let your family stay. You're the head of the family. I can ignore the rude words of this mother and son pair. I only need to see your attitude before making a decision." The unshaven Chen Feng hugged his wine gourd and looked up at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated expression. When Xiao Wanqing saw his cowardly expression, her anger flared up. She regretted that she was blinded by greed and agreed to marry this useless thing. Xiao Wanqing turned around and pulled Chen Feng to the front in front of everyone. She said sternly, "You've been a coward your whole life. Do you want us to be cowardly forever? Father, the outside world is so big. There's a place for us to stay. Why do we have to stay here and live our lives under the whims of others?" His son stomped his feet at Chen Feng in exasperation. The mother and son sandwiched Chen Feng in the middle and bombarded his ears left and right. Chen Feng seemed to turn a deaf ear to them and stared straight at Yu Qianqiu. Only when Xiao Wanqing nudged him again did he silently nod at Yu Qianqiu. "Chen Feng, your family really wants to go to the celestial world? I've said everything that needs to be said. Are you sure you won't regret it? Once I let you go, I won't care about you anymore." Yu Qianqiu reminded again. "Yu Qianqiu," Xiao Wanqing gritted her teeth and said, "Why do you have to scare an honest man? Do you have any credibility? As long as you don't scheme against us, what do we have to regret? Are you going to let us go or not?" Chapter 1193. Plotting against you? Yu Qianqiu sneered in disdain. He couldn't be bothered to argue with this woman. He looked at Chen Feng and shook his head. "Since you've already made up your mind, I have nothing else to say. I'll send you to the celestial world later." After saying that, he looked at everyone and said, "Who else is willing to go to the celestial world? Just say it. I'll send you all away together. Everyone, there's no need to worry. If you want to leave, just say it. I, Yu Qianqiu, swear to the heavens that I'll definitely not harm you behind your backs." As soon as he swore, there were a lot of people who were ready to make a move. Xiao Wanqing looked back a few times and saw several women who had a good relationship with her were trembling with fear. Obviously, they also wanted to leave this place. Seeing that someone had taken the lead, over 100 people came out one after another. There were men and women, and they stood in a group below the stage. All of them seemed uneasy. The hero army that had returned from outside naturally remained indifferent. They knew that Yu Qianqiu was speaking the truth. It was indeed too dangerous outside. Yu Qianqiu looked down and sighed inwardly. It seemed like a forceful melon was not sweet. There were still many people who were dissatisfied with him. After a moment he sighed and said, "Everyone disperse. I won't stop you if you want to leave. Go back and pack your things first. As long as you feel that the things in Utopia are useful to you, you can take them away. I'll give you an hour to pack. I'll wait for you here." After saying that, he closed his eyes. Everyone looked at each other, and many revealed looks of joy. It seemed like he was really going to let them leave. Otherwise, there was no need for him to let them pack their things. The crowd immediately dispersed one after another, leaving only Chunfeng on the stage. Hong Tailong and the others looked at each other. No one went to disturb Yu Qianqiu, who was on the stage. Chunfeng looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was no longer the same as before. He was in a daze as he recalled how he had been abducted when they first met in the 100 Flowers Valley. Back then, he had been a little unhappy, but thinking back, before he had followed Yu Qianqiu, his days outside had been very miserable, and he had relied on a small stall to make a living. In fact, after coming here, he had been the most carefree. However, after marrying Xiao Wanqing, he had started to become more and more unhappy. "Boss." Chunfeng suddenly called out to Yu Qianqiu, who had his eyes closed and was silent on the stage. Yu Qianqiu's eyelids trembled, and he slowly opened his eyes to look at him. In the end, he gently landed beside him from the stage, and took out the wine gourd that Chunfeng was hugging. With a flash of true samadhi fire in his hand, he instantly turned it into ashes. Then he patted Chunfeng's shoulder and said, "Pull yourself together after you go out. Don't drink anymore. Although the immortal world is dangerous, there's still a way out. If it's possible, I still want to persuade you to stay." "Boss." Chunfeng smiled bitterly. "The mother and son are determined. It's useless to say anything." Yu Qianqiu really wanted to scold him for being a good-for-nothing, but he held back in the end. After thinking for a while, he seriously warned, "If you encounter danger in the immortal world, you can say my name and say that you're my people. Even if you end up in the hands of the demonic path, when they hear that you're my people, they'll definitely want to use you as hostages to threaten me. At the very least, they won't harm your lives. Whatever they ask you, just tell them the truth. They won't be able to enter Utopia, so you can suffer less. After that, I'll think of a way to save you." Chunfeng's eyes were red as he looked at Yu Qianqiu. He was so emotional that he couldn't speak. Hong Tailong and the rest sighed, and shook their heads when they heard that. They deeply felt that Yu Qianqiu was looking for trouble for them. Guan Yu, who was standing beside Bai Suzhen, also sighed slightly. To be honest, he didn't really believe Yu Qianqiu's words before, but now he believed it. An hour passed very quickly, and the people who wanted to leave came back one after another. This time, there were more than 100 people. They were people who wanted to leave but were afraid that Yu Qianqiu would go back on his word. However, when they saw that Yu Qianqiu was really going to let them go, there were more than 200 people in front of them, and most of them were women. Everyone had brought enough things that they could take with them, especially Xiao Wanqing and her son, who were carrying bags of all sizes. Their bodies were also bulging. Chunfeng scanned them with his divine sense, and realized that they were filled with bulging storage bags. He did not know how much valuable Utopia had they brought with them. He immediately pointed at their bags in shame and said with a red face, You. He was so angry that he could not speak. Xiao Wanqing looked at Yu Qianqiu and snorted coldly. "You've served him for so many years and worked hard without any complaints. Even if you don't make any contributions, you've worked hard. You deserve what you've taken. Do you really think that you can live empty-handed in the immortal world? If you don't prepare more things, what are you going to do in the future? Are you going to continue begging for food when you go to the immortal world? All right. Stop arguing, Chunfeng." "She's right," Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Chunfeng instantly felt ashamed. He sighed and stomped his feet without saying anything. "Everyone, you'll know when you get to the immortal world." Yu Qianqiu reminded them one last time. He opened his hand and enveloped the 200 people with his divine sense, instantly sending them away. These 200 people had indeed been sent to the immortal world by Yu Qianqiu. They appeared in the valley where Yu Qianqiu had first arrived in the immortal world. Yu Qianqiu hoped that they would have a good omen so that they could start from the beginning and go further. He really didn't have any ill intentions towards them. At the same time, this place was not far from the small town where the Four Links Chamber of Commerce was located. However, they didn't seem to be as lucky as Yu Qianqiu. The moment they appeared in the valley, they heard the sounds of intense fighting coming from afar. Their expressions instantly changed. Everyone rushed to the top of the mountain to take a look. They discovered that the fighting had quickly ended, and most of the small town in front of them had been reduced to ruins. Suddenly, a figure flashed by and fell into the valley. He was covered in blood and panting heavily. It was Four Links Chamber of Commerce's Nan Tianlong. He had lost an arm. Chen Feng gathered his courage and led the way down. He helped Nan Tianlong up and asked, "What is this place?" A group of people also followed. Immortal World's Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Nan Tianlong didn't think too much about why the other party would ask such a question. Instead, he grabbed Chen Feng's arm and begged, "The demonic path massacred my Four Links Chamber of Commerce and captured my junior sister. Who can help me find my son-in-law Wu Xiong in the netherworld and ask for help? My son-in-law will reward you greatly." Everyone jumped in fright. They encountered a massacre from the demonic path as soon as they arrived. It turned out that Yu Qianqiu wasn't trying to scare them. The demonic path was indeed very arrogant in the immortal world. Chen Feng absent-mindedly pushed Nan Tianlong away. He looked at his wife and son, whose faces were pale. He smiled bitterly and said, "Are you satisfied now? Bastards. They actually managed to escape from a small Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Search everywhere. Those who dare to stubbornly resist our demonic path army cannot be left alive." An angry shout that caused everyone's hearts to tremble came from afar. The people in the valley immediately ran for their lives. However, the people who were searching soon arrived in the sky above them. When they saw the people running away, they immediately laughed and called out to their companions, "There are actually so many women. We can't touch that moo bitch, but we can at least touch them." A dozen people quickly rushed over. The cultivation of the people from Utopia was too low. How could they outrun these people from the demonic path? Fortunately, they had more people. There were more than 200 of them. They scattered and fled in panic. These dozen people really couldn't take care of them all at once. However, these people's gazes were all attracted by the big and small bags on Xiao Wanqing and her son. They thought that they contained something valuable. These demonic path people didn't hide their greed. They didn't give in to each other, and wanted to take it for themselves. They actually all chased after the family of three. They quickly caught up to them. Chen Feng overestimated himself, and wanted to stop them to buy time for his wife and son. In the end, he was killed on the spot because he resisted. It was unknown why he didn't say the words that Yu Qianqiu told him in time to save his life. Perhaps he didn't have the time, or perhaps he didn't want to say it. The mother and son were quickly caught up and restrained. The dozen people fought over the things in Xiao Wanqing and her son's bags. Some sharp-eyed people discovered that the mother and son's clothes were also stuffed with things. They tore off their clothes on the spot. The man's naked body was still okay, but Xiao Wanqing's appearance was indeed not bad. Her snow-white and plump chest immediately attracted the unscrupulous demonic fanatics' lustful lust. They immediately stripped her naked and took turns to defile her. Because her son's cries of sorrow and blood disturbed others' fun, he was chopped into two without any reason. After being abused by the group of demons, Xiao Wanqing, who had fainted, didn't have a way out. After they were done, she was chopped into 8 pieces. In fact, if it wasn't for the mother and son carrying too many things that attracted the attention of the demonic path people, they might have been able to escape like the others. Although they didn't know what their future would be, at least they would be safe for the time being. But then again, they had attracted the attention of the demonic path people, which was equivalent to saving the lives of others. It could be said that they died a worthy death. In the ruined Four Links Chamber of Commerce, the restrained Mu Tianjia wanted to cry as she looked at the cold-faced demon who stood with his hands behind his back. She originally wanted to commit suicide so that she wouldn't fall into the hands of the demonic path, but her reaction was too slow and she was restrained on the spot. Little did she know that the person standing in front of her was the domineering Great Demon King under Demon King 3 Knights. His cultivation level was much higher than hers. Once he saw that she had thoughts of committing suicide, he restrained her at lightning speed, causing Mu Tianjiao's plan to fail. You can't die now. You might be of some use when we attack the netherworld divine manor. If you're useless, it won't be too late for you to die then. After saying that, the domineering great demon king grabbed her and flew away. In Utopia's military camp, Yu Qianqiu was still standing on the general roll call without saying a word. He didn't know that they had encountered trouble after sending Chen Feng and the others out. After standing silently for a long time, he suddenly gritted his teeth with a gloomy expression. The lives of 1,000,000 cultivators. Even if Wen Rue revealed the secret of the base, it's impossible for Wen Rue to open the sealed Divine Ruin Realm. I still can't figure out how 3 knights and the others entered the Divine Ruin Realm. Chapter 1194. No one present could answer this question. Seeing him walking down with a gloomy expression, he slowly walked out of the military camp alone. Hong Tailong strode after him and consoled him with kind words. There will come a day when everything will be cleared up. Right now, the most important thing is to get rid of San Yi and that filial guy. It won't be much of a problem to deal with the rest of the Devil Path people. You think I don't want to? I want to kill the 2 of them right now. Yu Qianqiu stopped, turned around and asked. But the problem is that we can't defeat them at all. What's worse is that the demon god from the divine realm will interfere from time to time. Can't you think of a way to get some relationship with the divine realm to help? I want to too. Hong Tailong smiled bitterly. But even if I invite Coiling Dragon Old Ancestor, we won't be a match for the demon god. Moreover, how would I dare to return to the divine realm now? But in my opinion, the demon god won't dare to interfere with the lower realm. Otherwise, the Tao won't ignore it. We should focus on dealing with the one in front of us. It's useless for us to think too much about the divine realm. By the way, your master seems to be quite capable. He can actually cultivate in the boundary of heavens. Why didn't he ask your master to come out and help? My master is indeed powerful, but it's not like you didn't hear Granny Yan's words. Currently, he can only fight evenly with a great god early stage expert. Think about it, even a great god middle stage fire soul profound weapon isn't a match for that guy. I'm afraid it's useless even if I ask my master to come out now. I don't want him to take that risk. Besides, Yu Qianqiu paused and shook his head. You don't know my master. He has never cared about my matters. I'm afraid it's useless even if I ask him. Then what should we do? Hong Tailong frowned and muttered to himself. It seems that we still have to find a way to capture that earth spirit called Hutu. That's for sure. But we can't guarantee success. So, we have to hurry up and try another thing. Maybe it's a good idea. Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Suzhen, who was slowly following behind him, and muttered to himself thoughtfully. Blue sea essence. Beyond the vast continent was a boundless ocean. 2 streams of light streaked across the sky at high speed. Uniquely carried Yan Juexing on his back as he followed Demon Lord 3 knights in a rapid flight. The 2 of them did not tell anyone that they had come out this time, mainly because they were afraid that someone would find out and take the opportunity to cause trouble. After all, the 2 of them were the key to the demonic path's ability to sweep through the 3 realms. The 2 of them arranged things properly and then quietly left. After flying for an entire day above the boundless sea, the azure sea in front of them suddenly turned into a bright snow blue color. The 2 of them exchanged a glance and knew that they had arrived at the extraterritorial blue sea. The reason why this sea had turned into a snow blue color was because of the legendary meteorite sleeping in the depths of the sea. The sky was high and the sea was wide. Sporadic islands would occasionally pass by below them. This was not the first time the 2 of them had come here. They knew that once they stepped into the extraterritorial blue sea, they would be on the edge of danger. No matter how high their cultivation was, they did not dare to be careless here. So, they slowed down their flying speed. A few hours later, the Inferno Mystic weapon was driving the flying shuttle, carrying Yu Qianqiu, and was also flying over here. Yu Qianqiu had asked Wei Chuanqiu about the approximate location of the Blue Sea Death Realm. Then he came alone with the Inferno mystic weapon. Hong Tailong wanted to join in the fun, but Yu Qianqiu considered that he had not recovered from his injuries. Furthermore, it would be a burden if they ran into danger. So he let Hong Tailong recuperate in peace in Utopia. This was the first time Yu Qianqiu had arrived at the immortal world's boundless sea death realm. With the protection of the mid-stage great god Inferno mystic weapon, he was in the mood to look around. The moment he entered the snow blue sea, he slowed down his flying speed after receiving Wei Chuanqiu's reminder. When they encountered sporadic islands, he would occasionally throw a small silver ball down for safety purposes. The two people in front and him behind did not know that the other party had come here. When ferocious brown reefs appeared in the sea in front of them, the expressions of the three knights Demon Lord and Uniquely turned solemn. They flew forward slowly and carefully. This was the famous Blue Sea Death Realm of the Three Realms. Once they entered this realm, they would feel a bone-chilling murderous intent. The blue waves of seawater washed over all sorts of strange-looking, jagged rocks. All sorts of strange rocks were filled with crisscrossing holes. It was unknown how they were formed. When the sea breeze blew past, it would produce all sorts of strange sounds that were either sharp or howling. Some of the islands that were submerged in seawater were also filled with holes of various sizes. Seawater flowed in and out of the holes. There was not even a flying seabird in sight. There were no living creatures on the dilapidated islands. It was a scene of death. Xiao. Suddenly, countless snow-blue rays of light shot out from the ocean, shooting in all directions. Demon Lord, three knights, and Uniquely were greatly alarmed. The two of them used an unbelievable speed to quickly teleport and dodge, using their astonishing eyesight to quickly find the blind spots of the beams of light, dodging this wave of attacks that came from the bottom of the ocean. However, looking into the distance, one could still see unpredictable snow-blue pillars of light shooting into the sky. Three knights and Uniquely seemed to be very afraid of the pure energy light pillars coming from the bottom of the sea. They carefully flew forward, not daring to touch them. The two of them had been here before, so they knew that there was still a distance to the center of the Blue Sea Death Realm. There was an island in the center where they could avoid danger. However, it was not a place that ordinary people could reach. Only those with high cultivation or those who risked their lives to bet their luck would be able to reach it. That was their destination. However, it was this distance that caused the two experts to be as alarmed as they were before. Although Yu Qianqiu had heard Wei Chuanqiu mention the dangers of this place, Wei Chuanqiu hadn't been very involved in it back then, so he didn't know much. Yu Qianqiu, who hadn't experienced it deeply, didn't know the true dangers of this place. Even though he had already put away his flying shuttle, and had the Fire Soul Profound weapon carry him, his fearless flying speed was enough to make three knights and Uniquely speechless. However, this guy's luck was really good. Ever since he had entered the Blue Sea Perilous Realm, he hadn't encountered a single burst of destructive energy from the bottom of the sea. He had been advancing without a hitch, and he had even mistakenly thought that he hadn't reached the most dangerous place yet. As the saying goes, fortune and misfortune come together. Sometimes being too smooth wasn't a good thing. He and three knights were separated by several hours, but he boldly moved forward while three knights and Uniquely's speed slowed down. The result was obvious. There seems to be someone up ahead. If that's the case, my judgment is correct. This place isn't dangerous. The dangerous place is still up ahead. Yu Qianqiu narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself as he stared ahead. Then he waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and see who it is." The Fire Soul Profound weapon naturally obeyed and chased after them with a whoosh. Demon Monarch, three knights and Uniquely's hearing wasn't something an ordinary person could compare to. When they suddenly heard the sound of an expert flying over, they looked back at each other. Their vision was also not something an ordinary person could compare to. Before Yu Qianqiu could clearly see the two of them had clearly seen Yu Qianqiu and the Fire Soul Profound weapon. When they saw that it was these two fellows who dared to rush here, their faces turned green. They practically shouted at the same time, "Not good." There was no other reason for the two of them to feel that something was wrong. They had already experienced Yu Qianqiu's godly methods. Since the other party dared to rush here, it meant that they weren't afraid of the fatal light beams of the Blue Sea Death Realm. At this moment, The intention of chasing them was very clear. He clearly wanted to use the fatal light beams of the Blue Sea Death Realm to kill the two of them. The two of them were truly shocked by Yu Qianqiu. Looking around at this desolate death realm, the two of them didn't have the guts to rush here like Yu Qianqiu. If they were to encounter the explosion of the fatal light beams at the bottom of the sea, they would die. Thus, the two of them could only remain unchanging. Demon Monarch 3 Knights gnashed his teeth in hatred and said, "Bastard, how did he know we were here?" The Fire Soul Profound Weapon's flying speed wasn't slow. After the two of them closed the distance, Yu Qianqiu's eyes immediately went wide when he saw the appearance of the two people in front of him. The Fire Soul Profound Weapon, which was connected to his mind, immediately stopped. At this moment, the two of them were less than 1,000 meters apart. Both of them were staring at each other, clearly caught unprepared. At the same time, both of them could see the clues from the other's expression. It was obvious that they had accidentally bumped into each other. However, what 3 knights and uniquely couldn't understand was, why did he dare to rush here? Yu Qianqiu's first reaction was whether or not to run. After he calmed down, he realized that uniquely was carrying the unconscious Yan Zhuixing on his back. Then he wondered why the two of them brought Yan Zhuixing here. Then he realized that these two experts were just watching him without making a move. Yu Qianqiu was even more certain that there was something fishy going on. His eyes turned, and with the thought of escaping if he discovered something was wrong, he actually gathered his courage and approached the two of them step by step. Suddenly, a strange light flashed at the bottom of the sea. Xiu xiu, countless snow-blue light beams shot into the sky. Yu Qianqiu finally saw the terrifying light beams that Wei Chuanqiu had mentioned. With a thought, the Fire Soul Profound Weapon carried him to quickly dodge. 3 knights and uniquely were naturally no exception. After several waves of attacks broke out at the bottom of the sea, Yu Qianqiu was so scared that he was drenched in sweat. He took some time to take out a piece of extraterrestrial metal essence to experiment. He found that the snow-blue light beams could easily make a hole in the extraterrestrial metal essence like cutting tofu. Now he finally understood how the hole on the crisscross reef came to be. He also understood why 3 knights and the others didn't dare to act rashly. It felt like he was holding his head and forcing himself to come here. It was 2F** King scary. 3 knights and uniquely could roughly guess why he dared to rush just now. It turned out that he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Uniquely sneered, "Devil Monarch, should we take this opportunity to kill this thief?" Chapter 1195. That was exactly what Demon Lord 3 Knights was thinking, but just as he had the thought, a few more waves of snow-blue light shot out from the bottom of the sea. After dodging for a while, 3rd Knight glanced at the Fire Soul Mystic Soldier protecting Yu Qianqiu. It wasn't a wise move to fight with that monster here. In addition, he knew that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to come and go without a trace. He probably wouldn't be able to do anything to him for a while, so why take the risk? This isn't a good place to fight. Let's continue. Ignore him for now. We'll deal with him when we have the chance. Demon Lord 3 Knights called out, and continued flying forward with Uniquely, who was carrying Yan Zhuixing on his back. Yu Qianqiu's heart was pounding from the sudden appearance of this deadly thing. He was indeed thinking of retreating, but when he saw the two fellows carrying the unconscious Yan Zhuixing deeper into the death trap, it was truly suspicious. He had already vaguely guessed that they were also here to search for the blue sea gold essence. He didn't want to see a second demon god appear in the 3 realms, so he immediately gritted his teeth and followed. The two parties continued advancing through the extremely dangerous blue sea death trap, one in front and one behind. After an entire day, the two parties finally entered the central region of the blue sea death trap. In the periphery, the deadly snow-blue light pillars would explode intermittently, but in the central region, they would constantly appear. They would randomly shoot out in all directions, alternating with each other. Although it wasn't a collective explosion, it was even more impossible to figure out a pattern. If one wasn't careful, they would collide with one. When an island with a radius of more than 10 kilometers appeared in front of them, Yu Qianqiu watched as 3rd Knight and Uniquely landed on the island. From the lush vegetation on the island, he could tell that the island was a relatively large dead zone in the Blue Sea death trap. Although there were deadly light pillars crisscrossing above the island was safe. And under the seawater, there was a dazzling snow-blue light, which allowed Yu Qianqiu to guess that they had arrived at their destination. However, what made Yu Qianqiu speechless was the fact that San Yi and the other man were standing on the island with a sneer on their faces, glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. This is bad. I'm afraid that these two guys won't let me safely land on the island. Thus, he tried to enter the island from the other side. As he expected, the two of them leisurely wandered across the island and waited for his arrival. After the two of them accompanied Yu Qianqiu for a few rounds, 3 Knights Demon Lord looked at Yu Qianqiu and laughed. Yu Qianqiu, I want to see how long you can last outside. What a joke. I can hold on as long as I want. Yu Qianqiu was not satisfied with his stubborn mouth, so he teased. If I really can't hold on any longer, and if an accident really happens, I guarantee that you will never know the whereabouts of your son Yi Tiankong. Don't try to fool me with this. 3 Knights Demon Lord sneered. If Kong could cultivate, I might be able to be fooled by you. Unfortunately, he was born without the ability to cultivate. Even with miraculous medicine, he won't be able to live past 200 years. You're just a little thief who's still wet behind his ears. I don't know where you've heard of my son's name, but you're acting all mysterious. It's a pity that you only know the surface but don't know the inside story. You're like a jumping clown showing off in front of this lord. Do I look like a jumping clown? Yu Qianqiu looked at himself, then clicked his tongue and said, What bullshit, Demon Lord? You're just a frog at the bottom of a well. This lord is in a good mood today, so I'll let you broaden your horizons. He revealed a teasing expression and sighed. The God Realm's dragon race has a great technique called the Divine Dragon Empowerment Technique. Even the common peddlers of the mortal world can be imbued with cultivation. I wonder if you, the so-called Demon Lord 3 Knights, have heard of it? The moment he said this, the expressions of Demon Lord 3 Knights and uniquely changed at the same time. The former suddenly shouted, Yu Qianqiu, is what you're saying true? Ever since 3 Knights heard uniquely mention that Yu Qianqiu mentioned Yi Tiankong after the illusory Immortal City was destroyed, he had kept this matter in his heart. He felt that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't mention his son for no reason. There had to be a reason, but he hadn't found a suitable opportunity to chat with Yu Qianqiu. Now was a good opportunity, so he naturally wanted to test the truth. He didn't expect to hear the Divine Dragon Empowerment Technique. His heartbeat immediately sped up. What did I say? I didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu revealed a very surprised expression, then looked at himself up and down, and said with a wronged expression, I'm just a jumping clown. I'm just showing off blindly. As for whether people believe me or not, it's none of my business. Anyway, Yi Tiankong isn't my son, hee. Demon Lord 3 Knights wanted nothing more than to slap him into a pulp. Ever since he ascended to the throne of Demon Lord, this was the first time someone dared to tease him in front of his face. He resisted the urge to kill and said in a low voice, You mean to say that Yi Tiankong received the Divine Dragon Empowerment Technique and has a cultivation base, so he's still alive? Yu Qianqiu immediately cackled and said, As for whether your son is still alive or not, I don't know. I only know that there's a guy who can't cultivate but likes to swindle people. He comes from the demon realm, and his name is Yi Tiankong. He tricked a divine dragon into using the Divine Dragon Empowerment Technique, and gave him an early small god cultivation base. TSK impressive. The expressions of the two people on the island changed again. They knew better than anyone what kind of person Yi Tiankong was. He indeed liked to play tricks and swindle people. Yu Qianqiu had already made it so obvious. Even if he deliberately refused to admit it, how could the two not know that he was talking about Yi Tiankong, who had mysteriously disappeared in the demon realm? Yi Tiankong had an early small god cultivation base, so he naturally wouldn't die unless something unexpected happened. Demon Lord 3 Knights' calm face twitched, and he said through gritted teeth, Don't beat around the bush. If Yi Tiankong is still alive, where is he? I forgot. Yu Qianqiu, who had just dodged a wave of fatal light beams, said angrily, "Damn it! You're standing on the island leisurely while I'm risking my life here. How can I have the mood to chat with you? I forgot. You're my enemy. There's nothing to talk about with you. I'll just go back." The Flame Soul Profound weapon really did take him back. Demon Lord Three Knights immediately lost his temper. With a pained expression he said sternly, "Stop. I'll let you go to the island." "Damn it. The island isn't yours. It's not up to you to decide. If I want to go, I'll go." Yu Qianqiu's mouth was stubborn, but the Flame Soul Profound weapon still took him away. He wanted to take the opportunity to plant a silver ball on the island as a teleportation coordinate. In the future, he could do it anytime and anywhere. If he planted it nearby, he was afraid that one day he would accidentally teleport out and be shot into a bloody hole by the fatal light beam. However, as soon as he turned around, his eyes immediately froze. He stared straight at the island. On the tallest tree in the center of the island, there was a person standing there. Demon Monarch Three Knights and Uniquely quickly turned their heads to look up, and were also shocked. They saw a slender man in white standing quietly on the treetop looking at them. His snow-blue waist-length hair fluttered in the wind. His snow-blue eyebrows flew steeply to his temples. His eyes were also emitting a snow-blue cold light. On his cold cheeks, his lips were slightly snow-blue, and there was a light blue cloud pattern in the center of his forehead. His expression was cold and incomparably lonely as he stood there silently, like a demon or a god. Even Demon Lord Three Knights and Uniquely did not notice any movement when he appeared on the island. The two looked carefully and found that they could not see the depth of his cultivation. The shock in their hearts was indescribable. They did not know when such an expert appeared in the three realms. It was not strange that the two did not recognize this person, but Yu Qianqiu was all too familiar with this person. It was actually Wen Lanfeng, who had been missing for many years. To be precise, Yu Qianqiu also suspected that this person was Wen Lanfeng. They indeed looked exactly the same, but that lonely temperament between heaven and earth was not something that Wen Lanfeng possessed. What made Yu Qianqiu most suspicious was the snow-blue long hair, and the abnormality between his brows. It made him not completely certain that this person was Wen Lanfeng, who had been missing for many years. "Who are you?" Demon Lord Three Knights asked solemnly. He sensed an extremely dangerous aura from this person, and so did Uniquely. The two were on unprecedented high alert. "Who am I?" The person's snow-blue eyes revealed a trace of doubt, but his magnetic voice sounded like cold metal. "I hate it when people ask me such questions. It makes me very uncomfortable. So I'm going to kill you." The person's body suddenly burst forth with a suffocating murderous aura, filling the world. He suddenly waved a finger, and a startling snow-blue sword shadow burst forth from his fingertip, causing the world to change color. It directly slashed towards Demon Lord Three Knights and Uniquely like a thunderbolt. The two were shocked, and knowing that they were no match for this person, they quickly dodged. Without saying a word, they braved the great danger, and quickly rushed to the surface to escape. The person's fingertip gently hooked, and the incomparably powerful startling sword shadow was unexpectedly withdrawn, suddenly disappearing without a trace. Two fingers simultaneously bent and flicked, and two slender snow-blue sword lights chased after them at an unbelievable speed. "Sky-breaking blood!" Demon Lord Three Knights shouted, and the scarlet cloak on his shoulder suddenly fell off and expanded, instantly turning into an incomparably magnificent wall of blood light, cutting across the sea. Boom! Blue light and blood-red light shone everywhere, and countless fine red cloths fluttered in the air, perishing together with the two slender sword lights. Demon Lord Three Knights and Uniquely instantly disappeared into the distance. Their luck was not bad, and they actually did not encounter the fatal light pillar erupting from the bottom of the sea. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He didn't expect this person to be so powerful. With a flick of his finger, he was able to make Demon King Three Knight and Uniquely flee in panic. They didn't even have the courage to fight him. Just how terrifying was his cultivation. However, what shocked Yu Qianqiu was yet to come. He wanted nothing more than for this person to chase after Demon Lord Three Knights and Uniquely and kill them. But who knew that this person would play the game of not chasing after a cornered enemy, or perhaps he did not even bother to chase after them. His shining snow-blue eyes coldly stared at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was so frightened that he trembled. Wen Lanfeng, what do you want? Chapter 1196. The other person's terrifying and ruthless eyes were colder than cold-blooded animals. Anyone who was glanced at would feel panic. The eyes didn't seem to know him at all. Yu Qianqiu was now quite doubtful whether this person was Wen Lanfeng. Not only was his appearance more strange, but his cultivation was also different from Wen Lanfeng's. But if it really was Wen Lanfeng, why did it seem as if he didn't recognize him? Could it be that he was suppressed by me in the past and now wants to take revenge? Yu Qianqiu was prepared to leave as soon as he noticed that something was wrong. Wen Lanfeng. There was a trace of doubt in the man's cold eyes. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, "Who am I? Do you know me? Why do you also call me Wen Lanfeng?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He didn't understand what the other person meant. While he was stunned, the Fire Soul mysterious weapon dragged him to avoid the fatal light at the bottom of the sea. After stopping, the more Yu Qianqiu thought about the other person's words, the more he felt something was wrong. The other person didn't know who he was? That it's not convenient for me to talk here. Can you let me go to the island and talk slowly? Yu Qianqiu tried to ask. Seeing that the other person didn't object, he let the Fire Soul mysterious weapon take him to the island. That person looked at him with a longing gaze, filled with the desire to know. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and carefully sized him up again and again, scratching his chin. He couldn't figure out if this person really didn't know who he was, or if he was just pretending. On second thought, with the other person's cultivation, if he wanted to deal with him, he didn't need to beat around the bush. So he boldly flew over slowly and carefully stood on the same tree with the man. After carefully identifying him face to face again, he found that it was indeed Wen Lanfeng. Listening to what you just said, did someone also call you Wen Lanfeng? Yu Qianqiu asked with some curiosity. The man waved to the valley on the side of the mountain and said, "He said I was Wen Lanfeng and I killed him. He said I had been possessed by the devil, and said I was the sword demon. What does it mean to be possessed by the devil? Am I Wen Lanfeng or sword devil?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned again. He realized that his brain couldn't keep up with the other party's train of thought when talking to such a person. He looked in the direction of the other party's finger, and only saw a small rocky valley. Perhaps it was more appropriate to describe it as a rocky valley, but he didn't see anyone else. He can still speak after being killed by you? What the hell is this? Yu Qianqiu scratched his head awkwardly and smiled. Can I see who you're talking about? As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared without a trace. He was already standing in the valley, nodding at him as if he was asking him to go over. Yu Qianqiu nodded and flew over with the Fire Soul profound weapon. Looking at the direction of his finger, he saw a shallow cave on the stone mountain wall. At a glance, he could see the bottom of the cave. There was a body that had been dried into a human body sitting cross-legged with its head down. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't see the person's face clearly, he was shocked when he saw that there was only one arm. He quickly flashed into the cave. He walked to the corpse and squatted down with a dignified expression. There was a big penetrating wound in the abdomen of the dried corpse. He bent down to look at the face of the corpse. Although the face was dried, he could vaguely recognize who it was. As he expected, it was Li Duxing, who had left for a long time. Yu Qianqiu stood up silently and slowly turned to walk out of the cave. Looking at Wen Lanfeng standing on the rock in front of him, he sighed softly. Now he could confirm that the terrifying master in front of him was Wen Lanfeng, and he had roughly guessed something. From Wen Lanfeng's words, he could tell that Li Duxing was killed by Wen Lanfeng. The reason why Li Duxing was killed by Wen Lanfeng was that Wen Lanfeng had lost his memory due to Qigong deviation, which was the sword devil that Li Duxing mentioned before his death. As a result, Wen Lanfeng, who had lost his memory, was confused about whether his name was Wen Lanfeng or sword devil. Yu Qianqiu didn't expect that the two people who had left would have such a thing. One was killed by the other, and the other lost his memory due to Qigong deviation, and became a terrifying master. Yu Qianqiu had no idea what had happened between the two of them for them to end up here. He wanted to ask Wen Lanfeng the reason, But he knew that given Wen Lanfeng's current state, he would not be able to get any answers. Am I Wen Lanfeng or Sword Devil? Wen Lanfeng's snow-blue hair fluttered in the wind as he stood motionlessly on the rock. He seemed to want to know who he was. Yu Qianqiu looked back at Li Duxing, who had been dead for a long time in the cave. When he looked at Wen Lanfeng again, he didn't have the slightest fear. At this time, no matter how high Wen Lanfeng's cultivation was, he was just a poor man who lost his memory in Yu Qianqiu's eyes. He smiled faintly and said, "Your name is Wen Lanfeng. Sword Devil is your nickname." The light blue cloud pattern between Wen Lanfeng's eyebrows loosened, and he showed a look of sudden realization. He nodded and said, "So my name is Wen Lanfeng, and Sword Devil is my nickname." Damn it. Such a master became a fool. Yu Qianqiu felt that it was not worth it, but his eyes gradually brightened. Wasn't this the trump card to deal with San Yi and the others? He flashed to the front of Wen Lanfeng and said seriously, "I'm your friend Yu Qianqiu, do you remember me?" Yu Qianqiu? Wen Lanfeng's blue eyes were no longer cold, but full of blankness. He shook his head and said, "I don't know you." Yu Qianqiu was embarrassed and waved his hand. "It doesn't matter. I'll take you home. When you go back, you will remember me." He was determined to take Wen Lanfeng back to deal with San Yi and the others. Home. Wen Lanfeng's eyes were still blank. He looked around and said, "This is my home. I am very familiar with it. You don't need to take me home." Yu Qianqiu was speechless. Although Wen Lanfeng was an idiot, it was really difficult to fool him. After a while he coughed solemnly and said, "Wen Lanfeng, have you even forgotten Lu Yanqing?" Wen Lanfeng was immediately stunned by these words. His eyes flashed with an extremely chaotic look, and he suddenly murmured, "Lu Yanqing, Lu Yanqing, Lu Yanqing." Sure enough, he was still the idiot. He didn't remember anyone, but he still remembered that Lu Yanqing. Yu Qianqiu saw that it was useful to bring out Lu Yanqing. He was secretly happy and continued to provoke, "Yes, it's Lu Yanqing. Have you forgotten her? The place with Lu Yanqing is your real home." Lu Yanqing. My real home. Lu Yanqing. Wen Lanfeng was still muttering to herself, but what made Yu Qianqiu stunned was that Wen Lanfeng had actually cried silently. Drops of crystal clear light blue tears gently slid down from her eyes, quietly slipping down. Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt a little embarrassed to continue to provoke him. When Lanfeng noticed that he was crying, he raised his hand and stretched out 2 fingers to catch a drop of light blue tears. Under the refraction of the sun, the tears shone with a magnificent blue light. He asked, "What is this? Why are my eyes watering uncontrollably?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. When Lanfeng continued to ask, "Why does my calm heart suddenly have a very sad feeling? Why does the name Lu Yanqing make me feel so warm? Why does this name make my heart unable to calm down again? I seem to be very familiar with this person, don't I?" As he spoke, the light blue tears in his eyes continued to fall quietly. Yu Qianqiu nodded and stared at him with a wry smile. "Do you want to see her?" "Lu Yanqing, my real home." When Lanfeng suddenly nodded vigorously and said, "I want to see her very much. Please take me to see her. I want to go back to my real home." "Hey, then let's go home. Let's go home." Yu Qianqiu smiled helplessly and casually scattered a few small silver balls into the valley. Then the two disappeared together. The two who fled to the periphery of the Blue Sea death trap saw that the terrifying expert did not chase after them. They looked at each other and immediately stopped. Demon Lord 3 Knights frowned and said, "When did the 3 realms have such a powerful expert?" Eunuch Li calmed his lingering fear. After thinking for a long time, he said in a low voice, "He is indeed very powerful." If this subordinate guessed correctly, for such a powerful expert to appear in this place, he must have been tempered by the Blue Sea essence. Even his eyes and hair have turned blue. This is clearly a sign of borrowing too much Blue Sea essence. I remember that when Lord Demon God lost his mind, his eyes were blue for a period of time, but it was not as deep as this one. I thought so too, but if it really is a sign of using too much Blue Sea essence, it is clearly to the extent that it has penetrated into the bone marrow. I have endured the pain of the Blue Sea essence tempering my body. I cannot imagine that a humans can withstand the corrosion of such a huge amount of energy without being refined. If that is the case, he would have long become one with the blue sea essence. How could he still be alive? Demon Lord Three Knights said in shock. Eunuch Lee nodded in agreement, then shook his head in denial. Demon Lord, do you still remember his answer when you asked him? You asked him who he was, and he said that this question made him very uncomfortable. I felt that from his tone. It seemed like he did not know who he was, as if he had already gone mad and lost his mind, becoming a real demon. A demon who had gone mad was a completely different concept from those who followed the demonic path. The former was more accurately described as sick, while the latter cultivated demonic arts and did not share the same path as others. Gone mad? Demon Lord Three Knights thought for a moment, then sucked in a breath of cold air. That seems to be the case, but I really cannot imagine that someone could use too much blue sea essence and still survive. Just how strong of a will would that require? I'm afraid that even Lord Demon God could not withstand such a huge amount of blue sea essence, right? Heavens! Just what kind of faith would allow a person to persevere like this? It's simply inconceivable. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.